Chapter 221. After successfully negotiating the acquisition of the Quibbler, Ethan remained at the tower for nearly a week. During this time, Luna visited daily to learn the skills of a scion from Ethan. However, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Luna's interest in him extended beyond the professional. Luna was astute, carefully avoiding referring to Ethan as her boyfriend in front of others, thus steering clear of any potential rivals. As the Christmas vacation concluded, Jaina and the others departed from the tower, and Ethan, along with Cyrilla, made their way back to Hogwarts. With a promise from Dumbledore, the Hogwarts library regained its allure for Ethan. Despite it being the first day back at school, Ethan found himself drawn to the library after dinner. The library was unusually quiet, with only a handful of people scattered throughout the vast space. It was here that Ethan's gaze fell upon Hermione Granger, who was nearly buried under a mountain of books. From a distance, Hermione's hair appeared unkempt, resembling a fluffy cat nuzzling against the books. The thought of Hermione as a cat girl brought a smile to Ethan's face as he approached her. "Are you still busy at this time?" Ethan asked, his concern evident. "Ethan, you're here!" Hermione looked up, her face lighting up with surprise. Ethan's heart twinged at the sight of her. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen with fatigue and possibly tears, a clear sign of her overexertion. Without hesitation, Ethan gently pulled Hermione away from her work. "What are you doing?" she protested. "I still have work to do." Ethan's response was more stern than angry. "Are you still thinking about work at this time? Do you want to collapse in the library?" His tone startled Hermione, but she weakly protested, "But my books." "Just borrow them all," Ethan said decisively, waving his hand to summon his wand. The books on Hermione's desk levitated, lining up to follow them out. "Didn't you get any rest during the holiday? I remember you finished all your homework before the break," Ethan remarked, glancing at the procession of books behind them. Titles like Prohibition of Animal Culture Testing Order, Prohibited Trade Items, and The Intricacies of Rappaport Law among them. Realizing Hermione's intentions, Ethan inquired, "You're trying to help Hagrid win his case against the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures?" Hermione's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you guess that? But yes, I want to help Hagrid so Buckbeak can be defended successfully." Ethan admired Hermione's dedication. Despite her flaws, such as being somewhat imperious and not always handling emergencies well, Hermione's intelligence and kindness set her apart. Unlike some Ravenclaws, who could be indifferent and passive, Hermione possessed a deep-seated compassion and a proactive nature. Learning about Hagrid's predicament with his hippogriff, she had taken it upon herself to prepare a defense for Hagrid, a testament to her character and a hint at her future success as Minister of Magic. "What about Harry and Ron? What have they been doing?" Ethan asked, knowing that Hermione wasn't Hagrid's only friend. Harry and Ron should have been as supportive as Ethan. Hermione noticed her eyes reddening again. In Gryffindor, she didn't have many friends to begin with. Her relationship with her roommates was mediocre at best. Ginny, who was quite friendly, wasn't in the same year as her. That left Harry and Ron. Lately, her conflicts with Ron had escalated, not just over the pet issue, but also due to her relationship with Ethan. As for Harry, a recent disagreement over a gift had strained their friendship. Harry had received an anonymous gift of a firebolt, and Professor Gerard, suspecting it might be cursed, wanted to inspect it. Hermione, being cautious by nature, agreed with this precaution, leading to a quarrel with Harry. He felt she was being overcautious, and even suspected Hermione feared the firebolt would threaten Ethan's dominance in Quidditch. This left her feeling isolated during the holidays, dedicating herself to assisting Hagrid alone. Feeling Ethan's warm hands and seeing his caring eyes, Hermione's last bit of strength and stubbornness melted away. She cried in Ethan's arms, sharing everything that had happened recently. "Harry thinks he can outdo me in Quidditch with a firebolt. He's really being whimsical," Ethan sighed, then reassured Hermione. "See, what did I tell you? Gryffindor's friendship is so fragile, isn't it?" He comforted her. "Hermione, you've done nothing wrong. You're just looking out for your friends and standing up for what you believe is right. And your efforts to help Hagrid truly define what it means to be a friend, far more than Harry and Ron's actions." Hermione finally smiled through her tears at Ethan's words. "Ethan, I'm just doing my best, but I still feel clueless," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "Well, Hermione, would you like to hear my thoughts?" Ethan asked tentatively, knowing his perspective might not be what she wanted to hear. Hermione had devoted her holiday to helping Hagrid, but Ethan's insights could make her question the value of her efforts. "Of course, Ethan, I always appreciate your opinion," Hermione responded, her eyes shining. Ethan was the only peer she truly admired, as being with him brought her a sense of relaxation and happiness she didn't feel with Harry and Ron. With them, she often felt like the helper, facing their impatience, but with Ethan, she felt supported, giving her a rare sense of security. Seeing Hermione's openness, Ethan shared his honest opinion. "Personally, I think dedicating so much energy to Hagrid's defense statement might not be the wisest choice. It's essentially a mismatch of your strengths." Hermione frowned at Ethan's initial comment, but remained attentive. She trusted Ethan's judgment. He explained, "As a young witch still learning magic, you might excel in spells, but you're not well versed in laws and regulations. Trying to challenge established norms and expertise with your current knowledge is quite challenging." Ethan observed Hermione's reaction, ensuring his words were taken in the spirit they were intended. She nodded in agreement, so he continued. "Second, even if you rely on your brilliant mind, invest a lot of energy to understand these systems and cases and craft an exceptional defense statement. I believe you can do it with your brilliance, but you can only control yourself, not Hagrid." As he spoke, Ethan spread his hands. "We all know Hagrid. Given his impulsive nature, no matter how well your defense is prepared, he won't be able to present it effectively. You can't defend him in his place." Hermione considered Ethan's words carefully. Although they were hard to hear, the truth in them was undeniable. Therefore, if you exhaust yourself like this, there's no guarantee you'll win the defense, aside from causing your own collapse, Ethan concluded starkly. "So what can I do?" "Beyond that, I don't know how to help him." Hermione's eyes welled up with tears again. She was desperate to do everything in her power to help her friends. Ethan patted her shoulder. "Actually, you've done a great job, certainly much better than Harry and Ron. Hagrid would be thrilled to have a friend like you." "But that still doesn't solve the problem, does it?" Hermione said, biting her lip. Beyond researching and writing a defense, she was at a loss for what more she could do. Then she looked up at the boy she admired, her eyes brimming with tears. "Ethan, you're much smarter than me. What would you do if you were in my shoes?" "Oh, that's easy," Ethan shrugged. "I'd spend a bunch of money to hire the best defense lawyer for Hagrid." "That's indeed a good idea," Hermione smiled wryly, "but it's an option only you could consider. After all, I don't have the financial means, even if I wanted to help Hagrid." "But there are things that only you can do," Ethan said, wagging his finger mysteriously. "Oh, what's that?" Hermione asked, intrigued. "Of course, ask me for help." Ethan grasped the girl's shoulders earnestly. "You must remember, whenever you face any difficulties, you have me as your friend, right?" As he spoke, he patted his chest proudly. "You also have me, a Ravenclaw genius, a dragon-slaying hero, a first-class Order of Merlin medalist, and the president of the Erudite Society as your support. When you encounter a problem that you can't solve on your own, you don't have to bear it alone. You can always ask me for help." Hermione was deeply touched by Ethan's words. "Thank you, Ethan. You're so kind to me." As she spoke, she hugged him tightly. Ethan accepted the hug calmly, then said, "As for this matter, I am willing to fund Hagrid's defense and hire an attorney. At the same time, I'll also speak to my friend at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, allowing her to exert influence on the case." "Oh, Ethan, you're so kind. By the way, I also have some galleons here. Not much, but," Hermione said, a bit embarrassed. She knew her few gold galleons paled in comparison to the fees of a barrister who charged by the hour. "It doesn't matter. As long as you've done your best," Ethan didn't refuse her kindness. After all, she would feel better having contributed in some way. Chapter 222. As the little wizards gradually returned, the school year commenced. Ethan soon encountered Hagrid in a magical creatures class. To everyone's delight, Hagrid had prepared a bonfire teeming with salamanders for the lesson, making it exceptionally engaging. The The students gathered dead branches and leaves to fuel the fire, watching as the flame-loving salamanders danced across the crackling, self-heating woodblocks. After the class concluded, Ethan lingered, observing Hagrid as he diligently cleaned up the remnants of the fire and carefully placed each salamander into a stove. "Your class today was fantastic," Ethan approached and complimented. "Oh, it's Ethan. Glad you liked it?" Hagrid responded with a weary smile, visibly brightening a bit. Ethan noticed a crumpled official document in Hagrid's hand and inquired, "May I see that?" "Of course." Hagrid handed the document to Ethan, who read aloud, "Court date, April 20th. You are required to bring the hippogriff involved in the incident to the Ministry of Magic in London for a hearing with the Dangerous Animals Committee." Despite Hagrid's imposing stature as a half-giant, he had a heart as tender as a child's. The mere sound of the official document being read was enough to distress him, causing tears to stream down into his unkempt beard. "Oh, it's so cruel," Hagrid choked out, dabbing at his eyes with his sleeve. "Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Animals, 397. Buckbeak is clearly not dangerous." Ethan, who also held a fondness for the hippogriff, had to acknowledge that Buckbeak's perceived harmlessness was subjective, apparent only to those like Hagrid or someone as formidable as Ethan himself. To the average wizard, a hippogriff could indeed seem dangerous. However, this did not deter Ethan from offering his support. "Did you know, Hagrid, that Hermione spent the entire holiday preparing a defense for you?" Ethan placed a comforting hand on Hagrid's broad shoulder. "Oh, yes, I'm aware," Hagrid replied, his voice laden with emotion as he fought back tears. "Hermione, such a kind child, she's done so much." "But it's no use," Hagrid lamented, his sobs intensifying. "The devils on the Dangerous Animals Committee, Lucius Malfoy has bribed them. They've all taken his dirty money. If I lose Buckbeak—" Unable to continue, Hagrid was overcome with emotion. Ethan quickly shared his plan to reassure him. "Actually, I have some friends in the Ministry of Magic, all from last year's dragon-slaying expedition. They're not intimidated by Lucius Malfoy." Thank you, Ethan. You're a true friend," Hagrid managed, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. To Hagrid, Ethan's prowess in subduing formidable magical creatures ranked him just below Dumbledore in reliability. "But I can't let you spend money. I have some items here, collected from the Forbidden Forest. They should fetch a decent amount of gold galleons," Hagrid suggested, beginning to assess his assets. Ethan's interest was piqued by the unexpected revelation. As the caretaker of the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid's possession of valuable magical materials, including items as rare as unicorn hair cushions, was indeed a surprise. Hagrid's collection, though modest, was considered quite substantial in Ethan's eyes. Ethan reassured him that no significant expense was necessary. A simple word to his dragon maid, Onyxia, would suffice to handle Lucius Malfoy. Upon informing Hermione that the legal and relational aspects were settled, she seemed immensely relieved. The burden of worrying about Hagrid, coupled with her own academic challenges and the use of the time turner, had been immense. Every night, Ethan and Hermione would sit together in a corner of In the library, Hermione's study table was always laden with a variety of textbooks and study materials. These included arithmetic divination charts, rune dictionaries, illustrations of muggles moving heavy objects, and numerous dense notes. Hermione had shifted her study sessions from the Gryffindor common room to the library, a decision Ethan understood well. The fallout with Harry and Ron made their company awkward, and the library offered a neutral ground for her studies, with Ethan's company as a bonus. However, studying in the library had its own set of challenges, particularly the presence of other girls at the same table. Zhang Chu from Ravenclaw was a frequent visitor, followed by Ciri La, Penelope, and occasionally Ginny. But it was Luna Lovegood's presence that irked Hermione the most. Luna often engaged Ethan in conversations about obscure topics like psionic power, revealing her rare psionic talent. Ethan was thrilled to discover this and began teaching her psychic skills, much to Hermione's chagrin. As February arrived, the cold weather persisted. Ethan found himself with an additional task beyond his daily responsibilities, searching for scabbers in the Forbidden Forest. Hermione had mentioned that the pet mouse had become increasingly restless since Sirius's attack and had vanished over the Christmas holidays, likely due to Crookshank's pursuit. Ron was convinced that Crookshanks was responsible for Scabbers' disappearance, exacerbating the conflict with Hermione. With Scabbers missing, Ethan faced a heightened challenge. The Marauders map, provided by the Weasley twins, showed no sign of Scabbers within the castle. Relying on his prophecy magic, Ethan deduced that Scabbers hadn't left Hogwarts, but was not in the castle either, leading him to conclude that the Forbidden Forest was the only hiding place left. For a month, Ethan employed druid spells to install sentries throughout the Forbidden Forest and utilized plant vision to search for Scabbers. This method effectively gave him eyes across the vast expanse of the Forbidden Forest, making it nearly impossible for Scabbers to remain hidden. One night, while Ethan and Hermione were studying in the library, he suddenly received a signal. The detection magic he had set up in the Forbidden Forest had been triggered. Chapter 223. Sorry, Hermione, I have something to do tonight and have to leave first, Ethan said as he bid farewell to the girl. He left the library and hurried towards the Forbidden Forest while sending a message to Sirius. Unbeknownst to him, Draco Malfoy was stealthily following behind. Malfoy, the eldest young master, harbored resentment towards Ethan for rejecting his previous good intentions. Despite Ethan's strength and the favoritism he received from the professors, Malfoy found himself unable to retaliate directly. Instead, he devised a plan to catch Ethan violating school rules, similar to how he had dealt with Harry and the first-year students. Everyone at Hogwarts knew Ethan as an outstanding student, but Malfoy doubted that such a student could always adhere to the rules, especially after Ethan had killed the basilisk. Over the past month, rumors had circulated about Ethan's nightly ventures into the Forbidden Forest, but no concrete evidence had been found. Today, however, Malfoy saw Ethan entering the forest and decided to follow him, hoping to catch him in the act. Unbeknownst to Malfoy, his stealth skills were insufficient to go unnoticed, not just by Ethan, but also by other young wizards like Ron Weasley. Ron, consumed by the belief that Hermione's cat Crookshanks had killed his pet rat Scabbers, was on a quest to find evidence of his pet's demise. By chance, he discovered Malfoy tailing Ethan and, driven by curiosity and disdain for Malfoy, decided to follow them. What neither Malfoy nor Ron realized was that they were being followed by Professor Severus Snape. The professor, noticing Ron trailing Malfoy, suspected a conflict and decided to ensure that their actions didn't escalate into a serious mistake. Snape hoped to catch Ron in the act and possibly award points to Gryffindor. Ethan, leading the way, noticed the peculiar procession behind him and saw an opportunity for mischief. Slowing down, he led them directly to the Whomping Willow. There, he encountered Scabbers, looking worse for wear, and pretended to be surprised by the rat's presence. While Scabbers was distracted, Ethan used a levitation spell to capture him and brought him into the tree hollow of the Whomping Willow. Inside the tree hollow, Ethan sensed Sirius's arrival. He quietly took out a bottle of potion and scattered it around the cave's interior. This potion was a modified version of the diarrhea candy given to him by the Weasley twins, designed to be even more potent. The new diarrhea potion, with its taste significantly reduced, was easily packaged into candy. Ethan had shared this new formula with the twins right after the holidays, yet he always carried a large bottle of the finished potion in his bag, knowing well that it wasn't something ordinary people would use. However, the time had come for the potion to prove its worth. Ethan remembered that the potion was highly volatile under normal conditions, and its gas could produce effects even when inhaled. Having calmed the Whomping Willow with his druid spell, Ethan knew it would be some time before the tree could move again. Thus, the three individuals following him entered the tree hole one after another, unaware of the magic potion Ethan had sprinkled on the ground. What caught them off guard was not the potion, but the presence of each other. Ron and Malfoy, in particular, were surprised to encounter one another. Ethan had not proceeded further into the tunnel, causing Malfoy to be blocked at the entrance of the tree cave, unable to advance. Ron, acting recklessly and without understanding the situation, rushed in, expecting Malfoy to have moved deeper, only to run into his old nemesis. The two young wizards exchanged looks, but before they could speak, Professor Snape, who had also caught up, silenced them. He did not want their noise to disturb the individuals deeper in the corridor, as there was an enemy there he was eager to confront. As the trio above found themselves in a standoff, Ethan had already encountered Sirius Black in the passage, drawn there by the commotion. The atmosphere between them was tense. "Leave him to me." Sirius, upon seeing the rat scabbers, was consumed by rage and lunged forward, only to be repelled by a forceful spell. "Calm down and listen to me," Ethan shouted. However, Sirius, blinded by his desire for revenge, transformed into his animagus form, a black dog, and attempted another attack. Ethan, once again, subdued him with vines that sprang from the ground, when binding the black dog to the corridor wall until he reverted to his human form. Despite his predicament, Sirius did not plead for mercy, but continued to struggle and shout, Put me down, quickly." Ethan frowned slightly. "You will get Peter Pettigrew, but not now." The mention of that name seemed to infuriate Sirius even more. "You've already caught him. Why won't you give him to me? Are you lying about our deal?" Ethan sighed, looking at Sirius with a mix of frustration and pity. "Mr. Black, please use your brain. If I had no intention of honoring our deal, why would I bring you here?" At the entrance, Ron gaped in shock. Ethan was collaborating with Sirius Black, the supposed murderer, and Scabbers was somehow involved, with Peter Pettigrew's name being mentioned. What could possibly be the connection between Scabbers and Peter Pettigrew? Malfoy was equally surprised, but it was Professor Snape who reacted most intensely. Staring at Sirius and Ethan with a dark, ominous expression, he drew his wand. "You two, get out of here," he said, his voice cold and commanding, but before he could continue, just as they were about to turn around, Snape forcefully held them back. He whispered sharply, "Don't move, you idiot." It appeared that the Humping Willow, which had momentarily calmed down due to Ethan's efforts, was now slowly regaining its usual aggressive demeanor. Snape recognized that allowing them to leave in such a state would merely turn them into easy targets. "Didn't you know?" Snape continued, his voice laced with a hint of scorn. "A few months ago, Harry fell off his broom during a Quidditch match. His Nimbus 2000 was blown all the way to the Humping Willow and ended up in pieces. I certainly have no interest in comparing the resilience of a student's face to that of a broomstick." His cold voice then declared, "It seems you two have no choice but to stay here." There was a pause before he added, "But perhaps it's for the best. This way, you won't rush back and inform Dumbledore. Sirius, your end is near." Chapter 224. Snape, driven by a thirst for vengeance, silently cast a spell to immobilize the two, then glided towards Ethan and Sirius, moving through the darkness like a bat. Meanwhile, Ethan and Sirius's conversation continued. "Okay, I'm assuming you didn't mean to break the contract, but why don't you just hand it over to me?" Under the restraint of the vines, Sirius had calmed slightly, though his anger persisted. "Here you are?" Ethan sneered. "If I teach it to you, what will you do?" "Destroy it on the spot!" Sirius exclaimed, his voice laced with urgency. "Because of it, the Potter family met a tragic end, and I was wrongfully imprisoned for decades. I deserve this much." "Are you innocent?" Ethan found the notion ironic. In his view, Sirius hadn't betrayed the Potters, but that didn't absolve him of responsibility. As a Gryffindor, Sirius embodied the house's virtues of righteousness and bravery, standing against Voldemort. However, he also exemplified Gryffindor's flaws, arrogance, impulsiveness, and recklessness, traits that Ethan saw mirrored in Harry and Ron. "It was your reckless trust and arrogance that led to tragedy," Ethan continued. "And now you display those same qualities before me. Let me tell you, Snape was right about some things. Some of you are arrogant and impulsive." Sirius bristled at the mention of Snape. "You would listen to Snape?" "He was our enemy. Of course he would say that," Ethan countered. "If you think about it, this is all because of your cleverness. If you hadn't switched the secret keeper, would Peter Pettigrew have had the chance to betray them? If you had been the secret keeper, James and Lily wouldn't have been found so easily." Ethan's direct naming of James and Lily caught Snape off guard as he prepared to intervene. Snape was surprised, not recalling such a personal conversation with Ethan, but Ethan's words resonated with him, especially the mention of Lily. Sirius's anger turned to deep frustration. During his time in Azkaban, he had often wondered what might have been if he had remained the secret keeper. His trust in Lupin and oversight of Pettigrew's true nature were mistakes that haunted him. The tragedy might have been averted if he had paid more attention to Pettigrew's subtle signs of betrayal. Ethan didn't stop there. Your cleverness led to your friend's death. But then, why did you act foolishly? If you had the means to escape Azkaban, why wait? Did you think imprisonment was your penance? You're atoning to the wrong entity. The ones you should be making amends to are the victims, not your guilty conscience, Ethan pointed out sharply. If you hadn't been in Azkaban, Harry wouldn't have had such a miserable childhood. Do you understand the life he was forced to live? Eating leftovers, wearing second-hand clothes, facing daily insults and neglect. Yet, Harry still had to be grateful for. Ethan's words painted a vivid picture of the consequences of Sirius's actions, highlighting the deep and lasting impact on those around him. The conversation between Ethan and Sirius not only revisited past mistakes, but also underscored the importance of accountability and the complex nature of guilt and atonement. The family took a significant risk by adopting him, shielding him from the threats of the Dark Lord's forces. Yet, despite their efforts, Dumbledore and others did not make any attempt to improve Harry's life. As Harry's godfather, you had the opportunity to look after your godson in secret and redeem yourself while waiting for a chance to clear your name. However, you squandered your time in Azkaban, subjecting yourself to torture and causing Harry to suffer as well. Don't you feel you've neglected your duty? Ethan genuinely felt pity for Harry's plight, but his primary goal was to use these facts to confront the arrogant Sirius before him. With each word, he employed suggestion to enhance the impact of his words on Sirius's mind. The combination of psychic power and pointed criticism made Ethan's words cut deep, like a knife to the heart. As Ethan continued his critique, Sirius's face grew pale, and he struggled to speak, unable to form a complete sentence. Let's leave the past behind. No matter what I say, it cannot change what has already happened. Let's focus on the present, Ethan finally said, returning to the main issue. Now, if you kill Pettigrew, you might feel satisfied momentarily. But what then? Who will prove your innocence? You'll still be considered a murderer, and your attempt at atonement will seem like a farce. And Harry will lose the last relative who truly cares for him. Ethan left unsaid his concern about not being able to return to the Black family home or receiving his reward, but his previous words, combined with the silent power of moisturizing things, were enough to make Sirius question his actions. Betrayed by his own doubts and Ethan's persuasive tactics, Sirius began to question his long-held beliefs. Ethan's influence filled this gap, planting seeds of doubt about Dumbledore and fostering trust in Ethan, waiting for the right moment to flourish. "What, do you still want to kill Peter?" Ethan asked. No, you're right. I've made many mistakes. I should listen to you." "For now, we'll leave Peter to you," Sirius conceded, showing signs of compliance. Ethan nodded, satisfied, and continued. "Well, Sirius, proving your innocence requires more than just Peter's role. I also need a piece of your memory as supporting evidence. So I need you to cooperate and recall what happened back then." Sirius, now compliant, allowed Ethan to use Thought Probe on him. This technique, combined with Psychic Needle, delved deeper into a person's memory than legilimency, allowing Ethan to extract the specific memory of Sirius's innocence in the alleged crime. This operation not only secured the needed memory, but also allowed Ethan to reinforce the suggestions implanted in Sirius's mind subtly. If successful, Sirius would become an informant within the Order of the Phoenix, providing Ethan with information about Dumbledore as needed. Although the Order is generally seen as a force for good, Ethan, having had a significant disagreement with Dumbledore, chose not to rely on their inherent morality. By planting this seed early, Ethan ensured he would have the upper hand in any future conflicts. After completing the memory extraction, Ethan carefully collected strands of silver-white thoughts from Sirius's mind and placed them into a prepared bottle under the watchful and complicated gaze of Snape. Ethan, who had long felt like the mantis stalking the cicada, finally decided to take action. Chapter 225. Ethan Green, I want to thank you. As Ethan placed the bottle containing the memory into his bag, a mocking voice emerged. Severus Snape had finally made his appearance. "What a lucky night today." The old bat stepped forward slowly, his wand pointed at Ethan while his gaze shifted to Black, a manic gleam in his eyes. To think I'd encounter an old friend here. Sirius Black, or should I refer to you as the prisoner of Azkaban? The taste of revenge is indeed sweet. How I wish I had been the one to capture you. But this is satisfactory. It's time for you to return to where you belong, though perhaps you won't need to return at all. Let the Dementor give you a direct kiss. Afterward, his attention turned back to Ethan, his thirst for vengeance barely contained as he asked in a relatively calm tone. And you, Ethan Green, Ravenclaw's most outstanding student, why do you choose to side with this murderer? Break the deal, give me a reason, and your new residence will be Azkaban. It seemed Snape still harbored some respect for him. At least, he didn't immediately resort to violence upon arrival. Ethan shook his head. Snape's grudge was understandable. He had been tormented by James and his friends. He had reasons to despise Black. However, Black was still of use to Ethan, and he couldn't allow Snape to interfere. Ethan knew all too well that Snape wouldn't be receptive to any explanation at this moment. Thus, he abruptly raised his hand and aimed his wand at his potions professor. Expelliarmus! Snape reacted instantly, attempting to disarm Ethan. However, as the red light of the disarming curse approached, a shield automatically materialized around Ethan, blocking the spell's impact. Snape had never encountered an iron armor curse that could be activated without direct casting. In the next moment, he was met with a fiery explosion along the path of the disarming curse. It was Ethan's elemental rebuke that had been triggered. Snape managed to shield himself with an iron armor curse, but was caught off guard by Ethan's two passive spells. Losing the initiative, he was then bombarded by Ethan's relentless assault. Ethan merely waved his wand, without uttering a single spell, and a series of smoke and dust explosions blinded Snape. When he finally managed to clear his vision, he discovered he was ensnared in spiderwebs that had appeared out of nowhere. The sticky silk rendered him unable to move freely. Simultaneously, he felt his body begin to paralyze, his mind clouded, and his cognitive abilities significantly diminished. All Snape could do was watch as Ethan approached and confiscated his wand. Snape was baffled by his defeat. In theory, Snape's prowess should have allowed him to stand up to Ethan, but he was unfamiliar with Ethan's spells. Ethan had outmaneuvered him both strategically and unexpectedly, leaving Snape overwhelmed by the onslaught. Ever since Ethan achieved the Level 2 Arcane Master profession and reached Level 13 as a total caster, unlocking Level 7 spells, his combat effectiveness had soared. This advancement stemmed from his mastery of a particular spell sequence, a Level 7 transformation system that allowed him to store up to 4 spells of up to Level 5. When activated, it functioned like a spell prompt, casting the stored spells in succession. Additionally, he could link 2 or more spells in the sequence for instant casting, provided they were Level 2 or lower. The first effect of the spell is to exchange a 7th level spell for the chance to instantly cast a spell between the 4th and 5th levels. For Ethan, this was merely a method to conserve magical power, nothing too significant. However, the second effect of the spell sequence was somewhat astonishing. It allowed for the instantaneous casting of both 4th and 2nd level spells. It's important to note that even the advanced magical skill of Spell Instant Cast has a cooldown period and can only be used intermittently, which limits a mage's burst damage potential. But Spell Sequence overcomes this limitation. Although 2nd level spells are not very high in level, they pose a considerable threat. For instance, Ethan recently used Flash Dust, Spiderweb, Fool's Touch in quick succession. The first 2 spells are part of the curse system, launching physical attacks from the outside that are difficult to dodge. Ethan couldn't foresee how Snape would handle Flash Dust and Spiderweb other than by covering his eyes in time and maintaining distance. Once affected by these spells, the latter 2 become crucial in restraining Snape. Fool's Touch impairs Snape's cognitive abilities, while Ghoul's Touch can paralyze him. Thus, Ethan managed to simultaneously restrict Snape in terms of senses, physical movement, mental capacity, and bodily function, effectively incapacitating a man considered second only to the Dark Lord and the White Lord in strength. After disarming Snape, Ethan didn't let his guard down. knowing better than to underestimate his potions professor. He took Snape's wand and then used an activated rope spell to bind Snape securely, ensuring he couldn't resist. However, Ethan's thoughts inadvertently drifted to various rope techniques he had seen in his previous life. When he snapped back to reality, he realized that his subconscious had influenced the activated rope spell, resulting in Snape being tied up in a rather compromising position. The sight left onlookers dumbfounded, and even Sirius couldn't bear to watch. In the meantime, Ron and Malfoy found themselves immobilized on the ground by one of Snape's spells, unable to speak as their mouths were magically sealed. The two rivals could only glare at each other. Eventually, Snape's lock tongue and throat seal spell wore off, allowing them to speak again. In a panic, Malfoy asked Ron, "Weasley, did you bring the paper?" Ron's expression turned complex as he replied, "No, I was about to ask you the same thing." Suddenly, both of their stomachs began to cramp and gurgle loudly, as if boiling porridge. Hearing both their own and each other's stomachs, they turned away, trying to suppress the urge to vomit. Neither wanted to embarrass themselves in front of their archenemy. They both wondered if the evening's meal had been unfresh. An interesting turn of events was about to unfold. As the new month arrives, I'm reaching out for support through subscriptions, likes, comments, and rewards. Your support is crucial to me. Chapter 226, Ethan Green, How Dare You? Feeling utterly humiliated by being bound in such a manner by Ethan, Snape's frustration was palpable. "Release me at once, or else." "Ah, Professor, I think it's best if you remain silent," Ethan retorted, his lips curling into a smirk as he pointed his wand at Snape. "Throat lock tongue." Instantly, Snape was subjected to the same fate as his students. Observing Black's smug expression, Snape's face darkened with anger. To be outwitted and restrained by a student in front of his arch-nemesis was a bitter pill to swallow. Amidst this tense standoff, Ethan suddenly produced a mirror and uttered a few words. Following this, he waved his wand and a door materialized before him. A girl with pink hair and a brown coat emerged first, followed by 6 individuals donned in uniforms identical to hers. They were Aurors from the Ministry of Magic, clearly led by the pink-haired Auror. Ethan approached and embraced the female Auror. "Your portal spell is incredibly handy," Tonks complimented Ethan. They were all taken aback at first and hesitated to enter. The Aurors exchanged awkward glances, too embarrassed to respond. Suddenly, a young Auror exclaimed, "Oh, Merlin's fattest pants! That's Sirius Black, but what's happening here?" "And isn't this Professor Snape? What's going on?" Another young Auror inquired. "Silence. Since the captain has brought us here, we'll soon discover the reason," a stern, middle-aged wizard chided, clearly annoyed by his colleague's outburst. The Aurors fell silent, their attention riveted on Tonks. "So where is the person you mentioned?" Tonks inquired, gesturing for them to proceed. 2 Aurors approached Sirius Black and Professor Snape, wands at the ready, eyeing them with suspicion. Ethan had informed Tonks about Sirius and Peter Pettigrew during the Christmas vacation, so she had been eagerly awaiting news from Ethan. Upon capturing Peter Pettigrew and contacting Tonks, she swiftly mobilized her team of Aurors and arrived through Ethan's portal. After ensuring everyone was prepared, Ethan gestured, summoning a small, furry creature from a corner. The gray mouse, immobilized by Ethan's monster-holding technique, was unable to move. Ethan lifted the spell, and the mouse, momentarily disoriented, realized it was surrounded by the uniformed Aurors and panicked. It attempted to flee but was easily captured by Tonks, who had anticipated its move. Held aloft by a levitation spell, it squirmed and shrieked in desperation. "Is this the one?" Tonks asked, turning to Ethan. Ethan nodded. "Are you ready, Tonks?" With a nod from Tonks, Ethan glanced at Sirius, his eyes shimmering with determination. "Now, it's time to reveal the truth," Ethan declared, pointing his wand at the mouse. "Reveal true face." A burst of blue light emanated from Ethan's wand, and the mouse, suspended in midair, ceased its frantic movements. It fell to the ground, and in a dazzling flash, underwent a rapid transformation. A head emerged, followed by limbs stretching out, and soon a man stood where the mouse had been moments before. This man was notably short, with thin, unkempt hair and a significant bald spot. His appearance suggested a once obese individual who had lost a considerable amount of weight rapidly. His skin, resembling dirty, mottled fur, and his pointed nose and watery eyes retained traces of his rodent form. Peter Pettigrew, resembling more a cornered mouse than a man, glanced rapidly around the room, his breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps. His eyes darted towards the door before snapping back to the gathered crowd. "This is Peter Pettigrew?" exclaimed a middle-aged Auror, his voice breaking through the tense silence despite his earlier admonitions to his juniors to remain calm. However, his outburst went largely ignored, overshadowed by the collective shock of those present. Snape, bound to the ground, watched the scene unfold with widening eyes. His sharp intellect allowed him to quickly piece together the implications of Pettigrew's appearance. If Pettigrew was indeed alive, then the truths hinted at in the conversation between Ethan and Blake could very well point to another individual being responsible for Lily's death. Sirius, overcome with a surge of rage, looked as though he might lunge at Pettigrew, intent on exacting vengeance. However, a warning glance from Ethan stilled him. The memory of the boy's earlier intervention was enough to temper his anger, albeit with great effort. Pettigrew, meanwhile, scanned the room nervously, trying to gauge the extent of their knowledge about his deceit and survival. His eyes flickered as he contemplated fabricating a story to explain his fake death. Yet, before he could utter a single lie, Ethan acted decisively. With no hint of the finesse he had shown earlier, Ethan summoned vines that swiftly ensnared Pettigrew, binding him tightly. Addressing the Auror's unspoken questions, Ethan suggested, "You should examine his index finger. His status as an illegal animagus and his faked death are highly suspect." Ethan's words triggered a collective recollection among those present. 13 years prior, the news had spread that Sirius had caused an explosion that killed Pettigrew, leaving behind only a finger. If Ethan's assertion held true, Pettigrew had deliberately left his finger behind as part of a ruse to fake his own death. The question of why he would do such a thing loomed large, hinting at a deeper conspiracy possibly involving Pettigrew himself in the explosion. You won't believe him, right?" Pettigrew finally broke his silence, his voice tinged with desperation. "You should arrest him. He's in league with Sirius, and they're trying to kill me." The middle-aged wizard exchanged glances with Tonks, choosing to remain silent. He recognized Ethan's formidable reputation, the young wizard who had slain a chimera, been awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, and participated in a dragon-slaying mission. Having witnessed Ethan's prowess firsthand in Liverpool, he had no desire to cross paths with such a powerful young wizard. Moreover, he understood that the decision to arrest Pettigrew had been made well above their pay grade. The Auror's presence was merely procedural. The question of Pettigrew's innocence was not theirs to ponder. Thus, all the Aurors could do was silently observe Pettigrew, their gazes heavy with unspoken judgment. Chapter 227. Aurors just want to follow orders, but Peter Pettigrew sees them as lifelines. "He's here again, trying to kill me," Peter Pettigrew suddenly exclaimed, pointing at Black with his middle finger due to his broken index finger. "He killed Lily and James, and now he wants to kill me. You guys, I'm an Auror. You must help me." Black's inscrutable gaze fixed on Peter Pettigrew, his face more skeletal than ever. "As long as we're here, no one will kill you," Tonks assured him, "but we need to clarify some things." "Clarify things?" Pettigrew echoed, his voice rising in panic as he glanced around, his eyes landing on the humping Willow. "I know he's been after me. I've been living in fear of this moment for 12 years. Did you anticipate Sirius's escape from Azkaban?" Tonks asked, her brow furrowed. "Before him, no one had ever escaped, right? He must have used dark magic beyond our wildest dreams. How else could he have escaped?" Pettigrew argued, desperation tinging his voice. "He who must not be named must have taught him a few tricks." His words, though dramatic, seemed to carry a hint of plausibility. The middle-aged wizard recalled the events leading up to their departure. He had been in the Auror office when Tonks rushed in with news of an urgent mission. After gearing up, they encountered Deputy Director Jaina informing Minister of Magic Fudge about Sirius Black being spotted near Hogwarts. The revelation that Peter Pettigrew was still alive added a layer of complexity to the case, suggesting a potential miscarriage of justice that might implicate Barty Crouch Sr. in a grave error. Fudge's reaction had evolved from shock to a restrained joy, indicating his realization of the political implications. The truth might reveal Pettigrew as the true culprit behind the crimes attributed to Sirius, a scenario that could undermine the credibility of the Ministry's previous decisions, particularly those overseen by Barty Crouch Sr., a formidable figure within the Ministry and one of Fudge's political adversaries. Voldemort teaching me tricks? Black's laughter, devoid of any joy, echoed in the room as an Auror aimed a wand at him. Pettigrew recoiled at the mention of his first name, as if struck by the words. "What? Scared of hearing your old master's name?" Black taunted. "I don't blame you, Peter. Those who served him don't hold you in high regard, do they?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Sirius," Pettigrew stammered, his face now drenched in sweat. "It's not that I've been avoiding you for 12 years, Black continued, his voice heavy with unspoken accusations and a deep-seated sense of betrayal. Avoiding Voldemort's former supporters, Sirius Black's words cast a shadow over the room, causing Peter Pettigrew to shudder. "Peter, they all thought you were dead, or you owe them an explanation. I've heard them in my sleep, screaming, accusing the traitors of lying to them. Voldemort targeted the Potters based on your information," Sirius said, his gaze filled with burning anger. Snape, standing to the side, looked at Pettigrew with cold disdain. "It's unfortunate for them that Voldemort failed, and that failure is on you. Not all of Voldemort's supporters were captured. Many are still free, waiting for their moment, pretending to have seen the error of their ways. If they find out you're alive, Peter—" "I don't know what you're talking about," Pettigrew stammered, his voice even shriller than before. He wiped his face with his sleeve, looking up at the Aurors with desperate eyes. "You can't possibly believe these mad accusations, can you?" But the Aurors didn't meet his gaze. Instead, they looked to Tonks, the young leader of their group. "Peter, I can't fathom why an innocent man would choose to live as a rat for 12 years, Tonks said calmly. "I was innocent, but terrified. If Voldemort's supporters are after me, it's because I sent one of their most capable men to Azkaban, Sirius Black, the spy," Pettigrew exclaimed. Sirius's face twisted with rage. "How dare me, a spy for Voldemort? When have I ever sought the favor of those more powerful than myself? It's always been us, me, Lupin, and James, and you, always seeking the protection of stronger friends. I can't believe I didn't see you for the spy you were from the start." Pettigrew, sweating profusely, gasped for air. "Me, a spy? You're delusional. How can you accuse me of such a thing?" "Lily and James made you their secret keeper on my foolish advice," Sirius said, his voice fierce, causing Pettigrew to flinch. "I thought it was a perfect plan, a clever ruse. Voldemort would never suspect someone as weak and foolish as you. Telling Voldemort you could deliver the Potters must have been the highlight of your miserable life." Overcome with regret, Sirius was unable to continue, his voice choked with sobs. Snape's expression darkened further, his disdain for Pettigrew almost rivaling his hatred for Sirius. Despite his loathing for Sirius's arrogance and his role in Lily's betrayal, Snape knew Sirius was too proud to lie. Initially, Snape saw Sirius's acceptance of his Azkaban sentence as consistent with his arrogant character. But now he realized Sirius's silence stemmed from a misguided sense of guilt, not pride. Pettigrew seemed ready to defend himself, but Ethan had grown impatient with their bickering. "There's a simpler way to uncover the truth," Ethan interjected. Tonks looked at the boy beside her, acknowledging his insight. Indeed, magical means, such as veritaserum or memory reading, could quickly reveal the truth. "I recommend the latter for its directness," Ethan suggested, producing a vial containing a silvery substance. The knowledgeable Auror recognized it immediately. It was a memory. "This is Blake's memory, which he volunteered to gain my trust." Ethan modified his words slightly, avoiding revealing Sirius's original mistake. Sirius gave him a grateful look. "Next, as long as we obtain Peter Pettigrew's memory and compare them, we will naturally uncover the truth. The law generally does not recognize this kind of evidence, as it may have been tampered with," Tonks thought for a moment and said, "but this case is an exception. Pettigrew's survival itself is the biggest piece of evidence." "But there is a problem," Ethan said suddenly. "He is not Sirius, who wants to prove his innocence. If Pettigrew is indeed the murderer, he probably will not cooperate. Retrieving his memory will be very difficult. At this point, he added pointedly, "I think I need some help." Then, the hoarse voice he was waiting for sounded. "Maybe I can provide some help." Chapter 228. It was Snape who spoke again. Under Ethan's deliberate arrangement, the effect of the lock tongue and throat spell had ended, and Snape's hoarse, cold voice emerged, reminiscent of a venomous snake hissing its message. "If you believe me, I have brought my own potent veritaserum. Just 3 drops are enough to make him reveal his deepest secrets." Observing that Snape spoke as anticipated, Ethan nodded subtly. In truth, with his level of psychic powers, he didn't need any veritaserum to extract Peter Pettigrew's memories. However, he refrained from doing so to allow Snape a role in the proceedings. This wasn't out of any sympathy for Snape or a desire to offer him a chance for revenge. Any pity Ethan might have felt for Snape had long been eroded by his irksome personality. Ethan's actions, from encountering Snape on the way to the Forbidden Forest to enticing him to follow, allowing him to witness the entire process, and now waiting for Snape to volunteer his assistance, were all designed to implicate Snape. Snape's involvement in Pettigrew's trial was crucial in determining the stance of Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix. Ethan couldn't be sure of this outcome, relying solely on Sirius. This was not merely about avenging Sirius. It also signified the efforts of the forces led by Jaina Proudmoore to undermine those loyal to Barty Crouch Sr. in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and to establish their dominance. Currently, there are 3 main factions within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The first is led by the current director, Amelia Bones. The second is Barty Crouch Sr., who, despite now serving as the head of the International Magical Cooperation Department, still holds significant influence due to his leadership during Voldemort's reign. Many within the department still support him. The third faction is led by Deputy Director Jaina Proudmoore. Despite Jaina's competence, she lacks the backing of a centuries-old family like the Crouches or the Bones, leaving her slightly at a disadvantage. Thus, the crux of the matter is not merely Sirius' exoneration, but ensuring it happens under Jaina's watch. Success would mean a direct challenge to Barty Crouch Sr.'s influence and a significant boost to Jaina's prestige and power within the department. Achieving this without Snape's involvement would be challenging, but with him on board, understanding the full scope and eager for Pettigrew to face justice, Dumbledore would have no choice but to support Jaina, thereby overcoming Crouch's opposition. This was Ethan's strategy. Tonks, though not fully grasping the intricacies, understood Snape's capabilities from her recent Hogwarts graduation. Seeing Ethan's non-objection, she eagerly said, "Professor Snape, please proceed if you wish. It couldn't be better." Her enthusiasm seemed as if she had only just acknowledged Snape's presence, having previously ignored the man tied on the ground. Ethan's smile, barely noticeable to others, flickered across his face. Under Jaina's tutelage, his sister had learned the art of diplomacy. Professor Snape, lips tightly pursed and face livid, approached Peter Pettigrew. "Severus! Professor Snape!" Pettigrew screamed, desperate to explain. "If I were the accomplice of the Dark Lord, why would I not harm Harry?" As some appeared to listen intently, Pettigrew's voice grew louder. "I shared Harry's dormitory for 3 years. If I served you-know-who, why did I never attempt to harm Harry?" "I'll tell you why," Black interjected. "I know you well, and you won't do anything for anyone if you don't think it's good for you. Voldemort has been hiding for 12 years and is said to be half dead. You wouldn't kill someone right under Dumbledore's nose for a wizard who had lost all his powers and was in bad health, would you?" Blake's analysis of Peter hit the nail on the head. Before you return to work for him, you must be sure that he is the most powerful boss in the circle, right? Otherwise, why did you find a magical family to live with? That way, will always be informed of new developments, right, Peter? You want to know if your old protector becomes powerful again, it will be safe to return to him. Peter Pettigrew opened and closed his mouth several times, seemingly having lost the ability to speak. Professor Snape grabbed Peter Pettigrew's chin to prevent him from dodging, then took out a medicine bottle from his pocket, opened the lid with one hand, and stuffed it into the other person's mouth. His movements suggested he wanted to pour the entire bottle of veritaserum into Peter's mouth. However, he restrained himself and poured only 5 drops. Then Ethan saw Peter begin to lose consciousness and become distracted. Ethan also took action, raised his wand, and placed the tip against Peter Pettigrew. Just like he did with Black, he extracted wisps of silver-white substance from his forehead and stuffed them into the bottle. Beside him, Snape was still staring coldly at Pettigrew. His fierce eyes made Ethan worry that Snape might not restrain himself and could give Pettigrew an Avada Kedavra at any moment. But Snape, after all, was Snape. He finally calmed down and returned to the corner without saying a word. With the evidence in hand, Ethan handed the 2 bottles of memories to Tonks. Seeing this, Pettigrew's face became increasingly gloomy. He knew in his heart that as long as he was still alive in this world, this would be his biggest flaw. Coupled with the retrieved memories, he was trembling all over, whimpering sadly, and almost breathless. He looked terrifying, like a big bald baby curled up on the ground. But no one present showed sympathy. Black looked at him fiercely, with a murderous expression that made the Auror who was guarding him couldn't help but hold down his shoulders. Ethan released the vine restraints and handed Peter Pettigrew over to the Aurors for arrest. Zombies wander, Tonks commanded the 2 Aurors, who were responsible for escorting Pettigrew and preparing to return to the Ministry of Magic. It seemed that there were invisible ropes tied around Peter Pettigrew's wrists, neck, and knees. He was pulled into a standing position, still shaking. The man lowered his head in displeasure, like a grotesque puppet. His feet were a few inches off the ground, dangling limply. "Ethan, you and Professor Snape need to go back to the Ministry of Magic with us as important witnesses," Tonks reminded. "As for Principal Dumbledore, the minister will explain it." Ethan nodded. This was what he had expected. Professor Snape was also very happy. He wanted to see Peter Pettigrew being judged. Chapter 229. Before departure. Professor Snape, on the verge of leaving, suddenly remembered his 2 students, Ron and Malfoy. He pondered over what would become of them if he departed in such haste. However, after a brief moment of consideration, he dismissed his concerns and decided to return for them. Despite the escape route being obstructed by the Homping Willow, the other end of the passage led to the Shrieking Shack, and he knew the binding spell he had cast would eventually expire. This would allow the 2 boys to leave on their own. Little did he know the predicament Draco and Ron were currently facing. The diarrhea potion that Ethan had carelessly dispersed into the air had fully evaporated, and the 2 immobilized young wizards had been inhaling it for some time. At this point, Malfoy and Ron were struggling to resist the overwhelming physical urge. Ron, unable to hold back any longer, decided to relent, but what he expected to be a mere fart turned out to be a water fart, much to his dismay. The sound, unmistakably mixed with liquid, prompted Draco Malfoy to cover his nose in disgust, recognizing it as more than just a simple fart. Embarrassed, Ron's face turned as red as his hair, radiating heat like a ball of fire. As the restraining spell began to weaken, the shame of the situation and the anger from being deemed a traitor by his enemy fueled Ron's desperation. In a sudden move, he collided with Draco, causing both of them to struggle on the ground. Draco was taken aback by the impact, but even more so by his own body's reaction. The dignity of the Malfoy family and his self-control were no match for Ron's unexpected attack, leading to an embarrassing and loud release from Draco as well. Ron, seeing the effect of his action, felt a surge of satisfaction, mocking Draco for being in the same predicament. For Draco, the incident was a devastating blow to his pride, pure-blood arrogance, and self-esteem. He felt utterly humiliated by his enemy. However, this humiliation also freed him from his concerns about maintaining his dignity. Fueled by a desire for revenge against Ron, Draco launched a counterattack. The 2 boys, no longer concerned with their appearances, engaged in a fierce battle, targeting each other's vulnerabilities. The tunnel echoed with the sounds of their conflict, including angry curses and embarrassing releases. The stench quickly filled the tunnel, but their adrenaline allowed them to overlook the smell as they continued their fight with red eyes. Both wizards considered using a spell to clean themselves, but their wands had been lost in the darkness during the scuffle, leaving them to focus solely on defeating each other. The intense stench not only permeated the surrounding area, but also spread to the corridor below. Unfortunately, Snape was unaware of his students' plight, as they were no longer there. Ethan, meanwhile, had reopened the portal, allowing for an unexpected turn of events. Everyone had arrived at the British Ministry of Magic. Tonks gestured for Ethan and Snape to follow her, with a middle-aged Auror trailing behind them. Several other Aurors escorted Black and Peter away. Tonks led Ethan and the others into the elevator, heading directly to the first floor, which housed the office of the Minister of Magic and the logistics office. They walked along a thickly carpeted corridor, passing one brightly polished wooden door after another, each adorned with a small sign detailing the name and position of the office occupant. After turning a corner and walking for a bit, the corridor opened into a spacious area, ending at a shiny mahogany door. Where one might expect a peephole on a Muggle door, a large, round, magical eyeball was embedded in the wood, its bright blue iris scanning the surroundings. Tonks explained that this magical eyeball allowed those inside the office to see visiting guests and performed a security check, essentially serving the purpose of surveillance and security equipment combined. The sign beneath the eyeball read, Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. Tonks knocked on the door politely and, upon receiving permission, opened it. Inside, Ethan saw Jaina Proudmoore sitting opposite the minister's desk, greeting them with a smile and an ambiguous wink. Cornelius Fudge, the current Minister of Magic, sat at the back, clad in his usual pinstriped cloak. Upon seeing the group, Fudge stood up and shook hands with Professor Snape courteously. Then, his gaze landed on Ethan, his lips curving into a faint smile. Despite the friendly exterior, Ethan could sense the underlying calculations behind the politician's smile. "Ah, Ethan Green, we meet again. You are indeed the best student at Hogwarts. You manage to surprise us every time," Fudge said, showing his white teeth and appearing quite amiable. "Thank you, Chief Fudge," Ethan replied, maintaining humility and politeness on the surface, despite his inner disdain. Having decided to influence the magical world of the United Kingdom through internal subversion, Ethan knew he had to play his part well. To hear Lady Proudmoore tell it, "You were the one who discovered Sirius Black and Peter, right?" Fudge asked, in a kind tone. Ethan nodded, but before he could elaborate, a sudden knock on the door interrupted him. The newcomer was a man in his 50s, with a straight posture, stiff movements, and neatly trimmed mustache, giving off the impression of a meticulous man. However, Ethan noticed the man's suit was wrinkled, his tie undone, and his shoes covered in dust, indicating he had arrived in a hurry, a stark contrast to his otherwise strict demeanor. Ethan recognized the man, who nodded slightly to Professor Snape and lingered on Ethan for a moment before looking away. Fudge immediately stood up to introduce him. "Oh, my old friend Crouch, what brings you here?" Fudge exclaimed, revealing the man's identity. This was the target Ethan and Jaina were planning to deal with. Barty Crouch, the former director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a renowned fighter against Voldemort, and the current director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. His rushed appearance following the arrest of Peter indicated that someone within the Aurors had tipped him off, showcasing his influence within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. "Cornelius, I have several important matters to discuss with you," Crouch stated solemnly, his face devoid of any smile. Fudge frowned. "Miss Tonks, please take Professor Snape and Mr. Green to the lounge next door," he instructed, as Ethan prepared to follow. Ethan followed Tonks and left obediently. The lounge they entered was vast and luxuriously furnished, befitting the status of a minister. Professor Snape was seated casually on a chair, his posture slumped to one side in a display of gloom. It was clear he had no interest in engaging with Ethan. Despite Ethan having identified the true murderer of Lily, Snape's recent defeat at the hands of his own students, which left him bound and humiliated, was a source of embarrassment for him. Finding a chair for himself, Ethan sat down. He casually flipped through the Daily Prophet lying on the table. Meanwhile, he employed psychic detection to eavesdrop on the conversation happening in the next room, despite the soundproof and anti-magic barriers. The three individuals in the room were influential figures within the Ministry of Magic. Their conversation, though seemingly mundane, was fraught with underlying tensions and hidden conflicts. Chapter 230. Without any pleasantries, Barty Crouch Sr. got straight to the point. "Fudge, I heard that the Aurors captured the escaped Sirius Black and the long-presumed dead Peter Pettigrew." "Barty, your information is indeed accurate. We have just apprehended them," Fudge replied, his tone laced with a hint of dissatisfaction. This quick dissemination of news highlighted his insufficient control over the Ministry of Magic. Crouch Sr. didn't hesitate to criticize. Now that the wanted criminals have been captured, why are they being held at the Ministry of Magic? "I believe Sirius should be immediately sent to Azkaban. As for Pettigrew, it's highly likely he's an imposter. We need to verify if he's merely an ordinary person affected by the Black Confusion curse." "Our Aurors are fully capable of determining whether a person is conscious or under a spell," Fudge retorted, seizing the rare opportunity to stand firm against a veteran official of Crouch Sr.'s stature. He relished this moment of assertiveness. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement, being the largest and most crucial department within the Ministry, often overshadowed the other 6 departments, with the possible exception of the Department of Mysteries. Even the Wizarding Council 13, which liaises with the Wizengamot, falls under its jurisdiction. The head of this department is frequently seen as a prime candidate for the Minister of Magic, a position once held by Crouch Sr. This historical significance is why Ethan opposed Gianna's temporary transfer to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for her promotion. Before Cornelius Fudge's tenure as Minister of Magic, he was the Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, which limited his influence over the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and, by extension, his overall power as minister. However, Crouch Sr., now the Director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, retained significant influence within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement due to his previous role, allowing him to assert dominance even in front of the minister. This dynamic is why Fudge was inclined to collaborate with Gianna on this matter, viewing it as an opportunity to extend his influence within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Gianna, recognizing the gravity of the situation, suggested, "This case is extremely serious. I don't believe we should hastily send a suspect to Azkaban without due process. I propose that we have the case retried by the Wizengamot." Her suggestion, aligning with her role as Deputy Director of the Department of Law Enforcement, was immediately supported by Fudge. Crouch Sr., realizing he was being outmaneuvered, responded coldly, "Very well, it is indeed a dire future." Despite his intimidating glare, Gianna, a seasoned politician and spellcaster, remained unfazed. Crouch Sr.'s attempts to intimidate were futile against someone of her caliber. Resigned, Crouch Sr. demanded, "Then I also insist that if the trial ultimately finds Sirius Black guilty, the Ministry of Magic must also initiate trials against those who have slandered me." "Trials against slanderers?" Fudge asked, puzzled. Crouch Sr., his tone seething with anger, explained, "I believe this incident was orchestrated to tarnish my reputation. Regardless of the outcome, I will be perceived as having rushed to judgment." The revelation that Peter Pettigrew was still alive added a complex layer to the case, underscoring the need for a thorough and fair trial. "Undeniable fact. Do you want to deny all this face-to-face?" Fudge said, clearly displeased. Peter Pettigrew, who has been feeding you these rumors, Minister?" Crouch almost asked. It was Gianna who took the initiative. "Mr. Crouch, this is not a mere story. The Legal Enforcement Department has the responsibility to inform the Minister of the truths we uncover." Crouch caught her insinuation. "Since you're not part of the Law Enforcement Division, you shouldn't meddle in these matters. While I was battling the dark growth, Lord, you were barely out of diapers, young lady. Don't spout nonsense in front of me," Crouch retorted angrily. "But at least I wouldn't hand over my son to the Dark Lord in the midst of battle," Gianna shot back. "If we're going to dredge up the past, let's not hold back. Who's afraid of whom?" The room next door fell silent, and Ethan could almost predict how infuriated Crouch would be after such a pointed jab at his sore spot. However, Crouch ultimately held his tongue. With relations already strained, further argument seemed futile. After a brief silence, Mr. Crouch excused himself and left the minister's office. Gianna then discussed future plans with Fudge. After concluding their business, she left the minister's office, entered the lounge, and greeted Snape. "Professor Snape, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for looking after Ethan at school. He has indeed excelled in potions." Snape immediately understood the implication behind her words, showcasing her close relationship with Ethan. Snape glanced at Ethan in surprise. He had never expected that this outstanding student from Hogwarts would have such a familiar relationship with the young director. However, this revelation diminished Snape's interest in further conversation with Gianna. "This is entirely due to his own efforts," Professor Snape replied curtly and fell silent. Gianna Proudmoore offered a slight smile, not taking offense, and quickly moved on to inquire about the day's events. Beside her, a magical pen scribbled on parchment, automatically recording and taking notes. After gathering the testimonies of Snape and Ethan, Gianna took Ethan with her, making no effort to hide their close relationship. Ethan spent the night in Gianna's office. Throughout the night, Gianna worked tirelessly, organizing the trial for Blake and Peter, even contacting the jury. By the next morning, everything was in place, and Ethan accompanied Gianna to the Wizengamot trial room, located on the Ministry of Magic's 10th and deepest floor, adjacent to the Department of Mysteries. Rather than a traditional trial room, the space felt more like a dungeon to Ethan. The walls were constructed of black stone, and the dim, flickering torchlight cast eerie shadows. The atmosphere was somber and foreboding. The walls were bare, devoid of any decorations, surrounded by densely packed benches arranged in tiers. At the center stood a chair, conspicuously outfitted with iron chains on its armrests, clearly intended for the accused. The chair was visible from every angle in the room. As the heavy door shut behind Ethan, a chilling silence enveloped them. "Well, it seems we've arrived too early and are actually the first," Gianna remarked, somewhat surprised. Soon after, the judges and court staff began to arrive, including Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge and Barty Crouch himself. Fudge nodded at Ethan and Gianna, while Crouch's expression remained stoic, his eyes betraying his anger. The jury, comprising at least dozens of members from the Wizengamot, wore purple robes adorned with delicate silver embroidery featuring a W on the left chest. Among them, Ethan spotted a familiar figure, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. This venerable figure is not only the headmaster of Hogwarts, but also holds the prestigious titles of President of the International Federation of Magicians and Chief Wizard of the Wizengamot. It's no surprise that Fudge was so intimidated by him. The trial at hand is of paramount importance, involving Black, Peter, and Snape, 3 members of the Order of the Phoenix, with past affiliations to the same organization. His presence here is entirely expected. Headmaster Dumbledore also took notice of Ethan. A spark of recognition flashed behind his half-moon glasses as he smiled at Elu. For Dumbledore, although Ethan had somewhat coerced him into this situation, ultimately, Ethan was aiding members of the Order in clearing their names and seeking justice. Thus, in this scenario, the Order of the Phoenix is greatly indebted to them. After this encounter with Dumbledore, Ethan was confident that their plan was set for success. As the new month dawns, I find myself eagerly seeking your support through custom orders, Flowers monthly passes, comments, and rewards. If you possess any tickets, I implore you to bestow them upon me, the author. Your support is crucial to me. Chapter 231. As everyone settled into their seats, the courtroom fell into a hushed silence. Cornelius Fudge, seated prominently at the center of the front row, rose to his feet, surveyed the room, and announced, "Everyone is present. Let's begin. Are we ready?" His voice boomed across the room, directed towards a figure seated at the far end of the bench. Ethan's gaze followed Fudge's to a witch positioned at the edge of the bench. Her short, stout figure and the wide, drooping face reminded Ethan of a large, pale toad. Although he had never met her before, her distinctive appearance made it easy for Ethan to deduce her identity as Fudge's close confidant, Umbridge. At this point in time, she hadn't yet ascended to the heights of power she would achieve 2 years later. Currently, she served merely as Fudge's assistant, tasked with record-keeping duties during the trial. The witch was engrossed in the parchment before her, quill in hand, ready to transcribe the proceedings. "The trial on February 12th, Fudge declared, his voice resonating through the courtroom. Umbridge promptly began to scribble down notes, her focus unwavering. Trial on the case of Death Eater Sirius Black's betrayal of the Potters and the murder of Peter Pettigrew 13 years ago, Fudge continued. Interrogator. Minister of Magic, Cornelius Walder Fudge. Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Jaina Proudmoore. Former Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Barty Crouch. Trial Recorder, Dolores Jane Umbridge. Defendant Witnesses, Ethan Green, Nymphadora Tonks, Severus Snape. Ethan descended from the stage to join Tonks and Professor Snape at the witness stand. Following their arrival, Fudge instructed the Aurors to escort Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew into the deliberation room. The sound of footsteps echoed as the door at the dungeon's corner swung open, revealing Black, Pettigrew, and 2 Aurors. Observing the doc's solitary chair, Fudge's expression contorted in discomfort. Well, it seems we need another chair. Umbridge, could you? Ethan, not wanting the trial to be delayed over such a trivial matter, extended his right hand, summoned his wand, and with a slight flick, cast Duplicate. Instantly, an identical chair materialized next to the original, complete with a railing between them to prevent any potential conflict between the 2 seated individuals. An excellent use of the transfiguration charm, Mr. Green. However, this isn't Hogwarts, so I'm afraid I can't award points for that, Dumbledore commented from the stage, a pleased smile directed at Ethan. Fudge, too, acknowledged Ethan's assistance. Thank you for your help, Mr. Green. However, as a young wizard, you shouldn't— never mind. He caught himself mid-sentence, recalling Ethan's contribution to the Ministry of Magic's dragon-slaying mission, and chose not to reprimand him for using magic outside of school. With the seating issue resolved, the Aurors proceeded to secure Black and Pettigrew in their chairs, chains materializing to bind them firmly in place. Fudge then sifted through a stack of documents, extracted a parchment, and, taking a deep breath, began to read aloud the original verdict against Sirius Black. As he spoke, the details of the case against Sirius slowly came back to the forefront of everyone's minds. After Fudge concluded, a stern voice cut through the silence. Sirius Black. Ethan turned to see Barty Crouch rise to his feet, his expression grave. I must ask, why, after 13 years in Azkaban, did you never seek to file an appeal? And now you claim innocence and assert that Peter Pettigrew is not dead? Crouch's gaze bore into Sirius, as if attempting to intimidate him into silence. However, Sirius remained undeterred. That's because I was never given the opportunity to appeal. You threw me into Azkaban without a proper trial, Sirius retorted, his disdain for Crouch evident. And as for Peter Pettigrew's fate, you don't need me to tell you he's alive. He's right here before you. From the Ministry of Magic still unable to determine his identity for an entire night. Sirius's sarcastic words stirred whispers among the Wizengamots clad in purple robes. They were all aware that Sirius had a point. Typically, all wizarding cases were adjudicated by the Wizengamot, which acted as the jury and held the power to deliver verdicts, a process not even the Minister for Magic could sway. However, there was an exception. During the First Wizarding War, to combat the surge of Death Eaters and Dark Wizards, Barty Crouch Sr., then Chief of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, established the Magical Law Council. This body, subordinate to the Wizengamot, comprised a judge, a panel of members, and a jury, with Crouch himself presiding as judge. The council was tasked with overseeing the trials of Death Eaters, wielding the authority to adjudicate criminal cases and scrutinize evidence from convicted criminals. Following the war, Crouch's campaign for the continuation of the council led to his dismissal, as its existence encroached upon the Wizengamot's authority, a move that was met with considerable opposition. The murmurs among the Wizengamot caused Barty Crouch's face to blanch, his lips pressed into a thin line. The room only quieted down when Fudge, with a grave tone, requested, "Please provide the results of last night's review." 2 Aurors approached the stand. One carried a pensieve, while the other held 2 memory bottles and some parchment. Ethan glanced at Jaina before the Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement stood and announced, "Now I request that one of our witnesses, Ethan Green, present some evidence." "Application approved," Fudge responded amicably. Ethan then left the witness stand, approached the evidence stand, poured the contents of 1 memory bottle into the pensieve, and with a flick of his wand exclaimed, "Powerful phantom." The memory, which typically required one to immerse their head into the pensieve to view, was projected in the center of the courtroom like a vast 3D holographic movie under Ethan's expert illusion magic. The memories of Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew were vividly displayed, astonishing the Wizengamot. They had never witnessed such a spell, and the realism of the scene, complete with breezes and scents, earned Ethan looks of wonder and admiration. Some even speculated that he might be the next Dumbledore. Dumbledore himself regarded Ethan with a complex gaze, realizing he might have underestimated the boy's talent and capabilities. Ethan's presentation of the memories captivated the Wizengamot, significantly streamlining the evidence review process. After the memory concluded, Ethan noticed several female members of the Wizengamot wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the portrayal of Sirius Black's experiences. "I object," Crouch stood, asserting. "Memory is too subjective and easily altered, thus insufficient as evidence." "You're right, Crouch," Jaina countered coldly, "but that wasn't your stance during the pensieve trials you led. If Sirius was convicted based on a pensieve trial, why can't we use the same method to exonerate him now?" Jaina's pointed words left Barty Crouch Sr. speechless, highlighting the inconsistency in his argument and challenging the fairness of the original trial. After a prolonged silence, Fudge turned to Ms. Proudmoore and inquired, "What do you think, Miss Proudmoore?" "My opinion is that, given this trial is a retrial of the original case involving Sirius, we should permit the use of some rules from the previous trial. This approach ensures consistency with the principle of fairness," Jaina articulated with eloquence. The members of the Wizengamot murmured among themselves, finding her statement to be reasonable. Crouch, unable to prevent the evidence from being considered, reluctantly took his seat, while Jaina proceeded to interrogate the defendant. "Peter Pettigrew, why did you fake your death and flee?" she asked. "I lied to everyone, but I had my reasons," Peter responded, his voice trembling with fear, yet laced with evasion. He recycled his previous defense, claiming he was frightened of Sirius. Sirius, infuriated by Peter's shameless lies, attempted to rise from his seat, but was forcefully restrained by the chains. "It's astounding that a wizard would transform into a rat and spend 13 years hiding in someone else's home just to avoid a prisoner in Azkaban," a high-pitched, girlish voice interjected, highlighting the absurdity of Peter's excuse before Sirius could react. The voice belonged to Recorder Umbridge, who had stood up promptly at a subtle cue from Fudge, not hesitating for a moment. "Umbridge, the court has not given you permission to speak," Crouch stated coldly, prompting her to sit down, though she sought Fudge's approval with a glance. Fudge gave a slight nod. Ethan reflected on the scene, recognizing Umbridge's despicable nature, yet acknowledging her adeptness at navigating political waters, a skill that would expedite her ascent to power. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the Wizengamot members engaged in discussion, evidently swayed by Umbridge's intervention. Peter Pettigrew, looking visibly distressed, was hunched over in his chair, his face ashen and covered in sweat. In the stark light of his impending fate, his excuses appeared increasingly hollow. Crouch was about to speak, but Fudge preempted him. "Given the conclusive evidence, let's proceed to a vote." Chapter 232. After observing that the jury's inclination was largely in favor of Sirius, Fudge promptly decided to conclude the questioning phase and proceed to the voting process. This maneuver is indicative of how the Ministry of Magic can subtly influence judicial proceedings. Although the judicial power within the magical realm of the Kingdom of Yin is ostensibly held by the Wizengamot, requiring cases to be decided through voting, this arrangement does not preclude the Ministry of Magic from exerting its influence. As the entity responsible for organizing the court, the ministry has the discretion to shape the trial's progression. The situation can be likened to a race where both competitors are on the same track, but one has the authority to end the race at will. This competitor can strategically call a halt when they have a slight lead, ensuring victory, as long as the opponent's performance is not overwhelmingly superior. Fudge was now employing this tactic. As the announcement of the vote was made, murmurs and whispers filled the air among the Wizengamots, each sharing their perspectives on the case. In the dock, Ethan Blake nervously looked down at his toes, feeling his heart pounding fiercely, as if it were trying to break free from his chest. He had anticipated a more extensive interrogation and questioned whether he had managed to make a favorable impression, given that he had spoken so little. He regretted not elaborating on the sequence of events that led to the change of the secret keeper, how he was deceived, and his pursuit of Peter Pettigrew. On 2 occasions, he attempted to speak up, but the overwhelming anxiety stifled his voice, forcing him to take deep breaths and redirect his gaze to his shoes. The whispers eventually subsided. Ethan wanted to look up at the Inquisitors, but found solace in focusing on his shoelaces instead. Fudge then addressed the jury. "Now, please pay attention. Those in favor of Sirius's acquittal, please raise your hands." Ethan lifted his head and was surprised to see that, aside from Crouch, the majority of the jurors raised their hands. A few initially hesitated, but eventually joined the majority upon noticing the overwhelming support. Fudge swiftly moved on to the next charge. Peter Pettigrew betrayed the Potters, caused an explosion in a Muggle street, resulting in numerous Muggle casualties, and framed Sirius Black, leading to his wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban for 13 years. Ethan noticed Barty Crouch's expression turning even more grim, reminiscent of Snape's usual scowl upon hearing the mention of wrongful imprisonment. Cornelius Fudge concluded listing Pettigrew's charges and called for a vote. "If you agree with the establishment of the charges, please raise your hands." A significant majority, more than 70%, raised their hands. Ethan's breathing quickened, and before he could tally the exact count, Fudge continued, "If you believe the charges are not established, please raise your hands." Crouch and a handful of his staunch supporters glanced around, their faces marked by embarrassment. Crouch's hand twitched but ultimately remained lowered. Observing this, Fudge allowed himself a triumphant smile. "Mr. Crouch, you didn't raise your hand for either vote. Do you have any comments on this case?" Crouch seemed choked, unable to articulate a response. Fudge, sensing victory and not wishing to provoke further, adopted a more relaxed tone. "All right, then I'll take it. You have no objections to the verdicts?" After a moment, Crouch managed to speak, his voice strained from suppressing his anger. "Certainly." "Excellent. We've reached a consensus on the trial's outcome. Sirius will be acquitted and is entitled to reasonable compensation. The specifics of the compensation will be discussed post-meeting." And so the trial concluded, marking a significant turn in the lives of those involved, with justice finally leaning towards the truth. "Now, we need to decide whether Peter Pettigrew should be punished," he said, turning to Gianna beside him. "As the DEP, UT Director of the Legal Enforcement Department, I need to consult your opinion. According to the existing law, what crime should Peter Pettigrew be sentenced to?" Gianna immediately realized that this was a crucial moment in the war. The verdict against Peter Pettigrew symbolized the Ministry's stance towards Crouch. It was a direct challenge to his authority. Her decision could either establish her dominance or completely undermine an opponent with significant influence in the Department of Legal Enforcement. A lighter sentence, such as life imprisonment, would be a compromise, whereas a death sentence would signify a strong stance against such betrayals, preventing any future attempts to overturn the verdict. After a moment of contemplation, Gianna looked at Fudge and made her decision. He betrayed his friends and allied himself with the Dark Lord. He killed innocent Muggles and framed his companions for his own gain. These heinous acts are beyond redemption. Merely imprisoning him in Azkaban is insufficient. She declared, "I believe Peter Pettigrew deserves the most severe punishment Azkaban can offer for his crimes, the Dementor's kiss." Had Ethan not warned of Voldemort's return and the resurgence of the Death Eaters, Gianna might have chosen differently. With the first graduates of the erudite society yet to emerge, her position within the Ministry was not solid. Attacking Crouch now could provoke significant backlash. However, Ethan's prophecy changed the context. The impending chaos from Voldemort's return would prioritize stability, favoring those who could combat the Dark Lord and maintain order. This placed her and Crouch in direct competition, both advocating for a strong stance against Voldemort. Thus, undermining Crouch before any turmoil was strategic, even if it risked immediate backlash, as the impending crisis would likely nullify it. Fudge's satisfaction with Gianna's decision was evident. He addressed the jury. I personally agree with Deputy Director Gianna's judgment. Are there any objections within the Wizengamot? If you agree, please raise your hand. The jury was silent, the severity of the Dementor's kiss weighing heavily on them. Yet, Pettigrew's actions warranted such a punishment. Would a Dementor's kiss be too severe? Professor Dumbledore interjected. Perhaps life imprisonment would be more appropriate? Gianna considered Dumbledore's stance. Known for his opposition to cruel punishments, his suggestion was not surprising. However, she did not dismiss it outright. Instead, she turned to the Wizengamot members, urging them to consider the gravity of Pettigrew's actions and the consequences had Ethan Green not intervened to reveal the truth, contrasting it with the potential fate of Sirius Black had the truth not come to light. The Dementors? As the Deputy Director of the Legal Enforcement Department, she had always been openly against the use of Dementors. This question was most fitting for her. Everyone knew the answer. Without a doubt, if the Dementors caught Black, he wouldn't face a trial like today, but would instead receive the Dementor's kiss. Fudge's face turned pale, his previous statements now seeming like a self-inflicted embarrassment, yet they had convinced many. Hands began to rise among the jury members, growing in number. Mr. Crouch still did not raise his hand, but this time his opinion was overlooked by everyone. Well, it's obvious, Fudge declared, his face showing a mix of determination and cruelty. This punishment will be carried out immediately. Wait, suddenly, a voice interrupted. It was Sirius Black. Black, do you have any objections? Jaina asked in surprise. She had not expected Black to be the one to stand up. What had Ethan done? Hadn't he said he had dealt with Black? Pettigrew, in tears, looked blankly at the man beside him. They had once been close friends, and now there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Black glanced at him with disdain, turned around, and announced loudly, I am willing to exchange all my compensation for a chance, E. Everyone looked at Black with curiosity. I want the opportunity to witness the execution up close. I want to see him receive a Dementor's kiss with my own eyes. Black declared, his voice filled with 13 years of pent-up grievances and resentment. That scared me, as long as it doesn't keep him alive. Jaina breathed a sigh of relief, then turned to Fudge. The Minister of Magic nodded without hesitation. Of course, I believe Mr. Black's request is reasonable. No compensation is necessary in exchange. The jurors nodded in agreement. Given Black's circumstances, not only was watching the execution reasonable, but suggesting he carry it out himself wasn't considered excessive. Chapter 233. After hearing the final verdict, the light of hope in Peter Pettigrew's eyes vanished. He slumped in his chair, deflated like a punctured balloon. Under the Auror's arrangement, a Dementor glided into the trial room, heading straight for Pettigrew. Its passage chilled the air, sending shivers down the spines of those present. Many members of the Wizengamot, unable to bear the grim scene, exited the hall, Dumbledore among them. Only a handful of people, including Ministry of Magic staff, remained steadfast alongside Sirius to witness the execution. Pettigrew, in a last-ditch effort, twisted and screamed in desperation. However, his efforts were futile. Ethan's copying spell had rendered him immobile, the chains binding him securely to the chair. As the Dementor drew nearer, Pettigrew's screams subsided into silence, his gaze locked on the approaching figure. Meanwhile, Sirius, no longer restrained, stood motionless, witnessing the Dementor lift its hood, reveal its ghastly head, and begin to suck away Pettigrew's happiness and soul, bit by bit. This sight overwhelmed Sirius. He covered his face, fell to his knees, and wept inconsolably. His tears seemed to carry away years of pent-up grievances and anger. The wizards present were deeply moved by his display of raw emotion. The harrowing experience of witnessing Pettigrew's execution seemed slightly alleviated by the sight of Sirius's profound sorrow. Here was a wizard who had once thrived, only to be betrayed by someone he considered a friend, leading to the death of his best friend and family, and suffering 13 years of wrongful imprisonment. In a corner unnoticed, Snape lingered in the shadows, subtly wiping his eyes with his sleeve. After a while, Ethan approached Sirius, offering a comforting tap on the shoulder. Sirius looked up, his face streaked with tears, and met Ethan's empathetic gaze. No words were exchanged, yet a surge of gratitude, respect, and reassurance filled Sirius's heart. Ethan's actions had planted seeds of hope that were now beginning to sprout. "Come on, Black. Dumbledore is waiting for you outside," Ethan encouraged. "But your reward," Sirius began, only to be interrupted by Ethan. "Don't worry about that now. Your collection isn't going anywhere. We'll discuss the reward later." "I understand," Sirius nodded, then with a hint of concern, added, "You shouldn't have witnessed this execution. It's too harsh for someone your age." Ethan appreciated the concern, but reassured him. "Thank you, but don't worry about me. I've faced death before. The thestral carriage at Hogwarts is proof of that. On your part, I sense you haven't fully come to terms with everything." "Come to terms? How can one find peace after 13 years of torment?" Sirius sighed. "Death might be a punishment, but the agony of having one's soul sucked away hardly compensates for all the suffering." Sirius was surprised at his own openness with Ethan, perhaps influenced by the boy's calm demeanor and strength, or maybe because Ethan had genuinely aided him, from capturing Pettigrew to proving his innocence. Sirius had observed Ethan's interactions with Auror Captain Tunks and Deputy Director Jaina of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Their dedication to the case, largely influenced by Ethan, had not gone unnoticed. In Sirius's eyes, Ethan, though not on par with Dumbledore, had become a remarkably reliable ally. Ethan, noting Sirius's lingering pain, responded earnestly, "You're right. Delayed justice is insufficient. To appease people's hearts, it seems to me that Peter Pettigrew has long been punished for his mistakes. For 13 years, he could only live as a mouse, hiding in a wizard's family, living in constant fear. This ordeal may have caused him more pain and suffering than the damage inflicted by a Dementor's kiss." Ethan took these words to heart, and the lingering pain and resentment in his heart seemed to be alleviated. "Okay, don't worry about this," Ethan said in an encouraging tone. "Your first priority is to take a bath, change into fresh clothes, eat a full meal, and welcome a new life." He helped the man up encouragingly. "Your friend Lupin and your godson Harry are waiting for you at Hogwarts." Black nodded vigorously and followed Ethan's suggestion. Ethan watched him leave the trial hall and saw him picked up by Dumbledore. At this moment, Jaina approached Ethan. "Come on, Ethan, let's get out of here." As the deputy director of the law enforcement department and the Princess of Kultiras, she did not like the gloomy atmosphere of the trial hall. However, Ethan did not move immediately. He looked towards the audience, where a witch was sitting in the back row, her golden hair styled into delicate, stiff curls, wearing a magenta robe, and her glasses set with jewels. Her automatic quill was moving rapidly. This was Rita Skeeter, the chief reporter of the Daily Prophet, with whom Ethan had worked before. "Sister Jaina, that's Rita I was talking about. If you need media assistance or anything, talk to her," Ethan reminded in a low voice. Jaina nodded knowingly and walked towards Rita. Upon seeing Jaina, Rita was briefly stunned, then they engaged in a lively chat. Ethan was not worried about Rita at all. She was a person who understood the current affairs and would not easily provoke those in power, especially since Jaina had just successfully reversed Sirius's case, dealing a heavy blow to the old Barty Crouch's influence. As a realist, Rita, a young reporter, could only benefit from making friends with such influential figures. Ethan didn't care what they discussed. After leaving the Ministry of Magic, he teleported back to the entrance of Hogwarts and walked towards the school. But just as he was about to enter the castle, he suddenly heard someone calling him. Turning around, he saw Professor McGonagall, who looked at him solemnly. Lupin, standing next to her, had anxiety written all over his face. Harry and Hermione were following the two professors, engaged in a conversation. And there was Luna. What was she doing here? They were all gathered together, but why? Ethan stepped forward and was immediately addressed by Professor McGonagall. "Mr. Green, after a day, you finally returned to school. Although we received a notice from the Ministry of Magic, I am still curious about what you have been doing." "I went to the Ministry of Magic to assist with a case," Ethan explained simply. "I see," Professor McGonagall nodded. "Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy both disappeared the night you left. Do you know their whereabouts?" "I don't know. Ron and Malfoy are both missing?" Ethan asked, barely suppressing his laughter. "Yes," Professor Lupin nodded gravely. "Are we looking for them?" Because they disappeared at the same time as you, we thought they might be related to you. I followed them to find you, Luna added. Ethan didn't want to reveal too much, so he evaded the question. Have you asked Professor Snape? He went to the Ministry of Magic with me. Maybe he saw them before that. But this attempt to divert attention failed. The Ministry of Magic has informed us of this. We have naturally contacted Professor Snape, but for some reason, the owl, Professor McGonagall explained, we sent someone, but they have not returned yet. Of course, they couldn't find it. At this moment, in Godric's Hollow, Professor Snape stood in front of a tomb made of white marble. The inscription on the tombstone seemed to shine in the darkness. There was no need to kneel or even get very close to read the inscription clearly. It read, James Potter, born on March 27, 1960, and died on October 31, 1981. Lily Potter, born on January 30, 1960, and died on October 31, 1981. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. Peter Pettigrew was dead, and Snape had avenged Lily. But what did it matter? Lily's remains lay below in the cold, embraced by ice, snow, and stone, devoid of consciousness. Tears suddenly welled up, scalding hot, and froze instantly upon his face. What was the point of wiping them away or hiding his grief? He allowed the tears to flow out freely, his lips pressed tightly together, as he gazed down at the thick soil covering Lily's body beneath, where now only bones and soil remained. He was unaware, or perhaps didn't care, that the person who loved her was standing so close. He let his tears flow, his gaze fixed on the tombstone, on the name Lily. After a long while, he raised his wand and drew a circle in the air. A rose wreath immediately bloomed in front of him. Professor Snape caught it and gently placed it under Lily's name, a silent tribute to a love that endured beyond death. Chapter 234. Seeing that Snape was nowhere to be found and to prevent any mishaps, Ethan felt compelled to share the news himself. Since Professor Snape is not here, I'll take you to where I last saw him. Perhaps we can uncover some clues there, Ethan said. Where? Harry and Hermione asked together. Follow me, Ethan replied, casting a brief glance at Professor Lupin. He was aware that the destination, the road leading to the shrieking shack where Professor Lupin had once transformed into a werewolf, might stir uncomfortable memories for him. This glance left Lupin puzzled, but as everyone had already started to follow Ethan, he didn't voice his questions and simply joined them. Under Ethan's guidance, they swiftly made their way into the Forbidden Forest. Professor McGonagall, suppressing the urge to reprimand Ethan, sternly reminded him, Mr. Green, it is against the rules for you to enter the Forbidden Forest. I'm sorry, Professor McGonagall, but there's a good reason for this, Ethan explained as they walked. I need to find a rat in the Forbidden Forest to help clear Sirius Black's name. Looking for a rat? Lupin was taken aback. Sirius? Harry's eyes widened. Clear his name? Hermione gasped. What is all this about? Professor McGonagall asked, clearly displeased. Is this why the Ministry of Magic granted you and Severus leave? You're correct, Ethan responded straightforwardly. Just before my return, I attended a trial where Sirius Black was proven innocent. The crime he was accused of was actually committed by someone else. As soon as he finished, everyone stopped in shock, their eyes fixed on Ethan, eager for more information. So, you've been away all this time for this reason? You mean to say Sirius is innocent? Who is the real culprit? Does it have something to do with that rat? If it wasn't Black, who betrayed my parents, then who was it? So, you've been secretly aiding him since then. Luna, Professor McGonagall, Professor Lupin, Harry, and Hermione bombarded him with questions. Ethan didn't address each question individually, but instead recounted the events of that day. In the eerie silence of the Forbidden Forest, punctuated only by the cold wind whistling through the trees, Ethan's detailed narration filled the air. This is simply unbelievable. How could Ron Scabbers be Peter Pettigrew? Harry found Ethan's story hard to believe. Why is that impossible? Ethan asked, surprised by his reaction. Because if Peter Pettigrew were an animagus, people would know, Hermione interjected before Harry could respond. Ethan turned to her. After Professor McGonagall introduced the animagus topic, I researched it. I found a book that mentioned the risk of becoming obsessed and unable to revert to human form during animagus practice. Thus, the Ministry of Magic strictly regulates it, requiring all animagi to register their animal forms and characteristics with the Office for the Prohibition of Misuse of Magic. Hearing Hermione's explanation, a rare smile appeared on Professor McGonagall's usually stern face. This registration is public. Out of curiosity, I checked it and found Professor McGonagall's name among the 7 animagi of this century. Peter Pettigrew's name was not listed. However, I believe there are always some who cleverly avoid registering with the Ministry, Hermione concluded, implying she had witnessed someone bypassing the Ministry's regulations to become an animagus. The understanding between them was clear. Indeed, Hermione's assumption is correct, Professor Lupin confirmed, his voice tinged with sadness. To my knowledge, there were indeed 3 unregistered animagi at Hogwarts. Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and of course Harry, and your dad, James Potter, Lupin said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. My dad too? Harry was surprised. Yes, Lupin confirmed, a wistful look crossing his face. They did it for me. Sirius contributed the family's secrets. The Black family had conducted special research on the animagus transformation. Their combined talents made the transformation possible. Ethan's expression turned serious upon hearing this. The information he had collected from Sirius indeed contained valuable insights. He was curious about how the Black family's secret method had enabled 3 ordinary young wizards to complete such a complex animagus transformation, a feat many powerful wizards had never achieved. If he could master it, perhaps he could assist his friends and girlfriend in completing their animagus transformations, possibly even achieving magical animagus forms. Lupin continued, Your father and Sirius were the smartest students in the school. They succeeded, but animagus transformation can be dangerous. Harry listened intently, cherishing stories about his parents, whom he had never known. Hermione, looking puzzled, asked, Professor Lupin, what about yourself? Lupin didn't directly answer her question but went on. Pettigrew's animagus form was a rat. Everyone thought Sirius had killed Peter, and I believed it too. His voice trailed off, and he lowered his head in self-reproach, tears welling in his eyes as he contemplated the injustice Sirius had suffered in Azkaban. The group fell silent, not wanting to interrupt his reflection on the past. Soon, they neared the Humping Willow. Sirius has been hiding in the Shrieking Shack, and you met him here, Ethan noted, glancing at Lupin. Snape followed us here. Have you seen any sign of Ron and Malfoy? As he spoke, Ethan stepped forward and extended his hand toward the Humping Willow. The tree, which had been thrashing wildly, gradually stilled, becoming as docile as an ordinary plant. I've never seen this technique before. How did you do it? Professor McGonagall asked, looking at Ethan with a mix of pride and bewilderment. She admitted to herself that she had less and less to teach this talented student, who seemed to surpass her understanding more each day. Maybe the Humping Willow is just afraid of me, Ethan said casually. With the tree's violent branches now still, the entrance to a hole was revealed. Ethan, Professor Lupin, and the others approached, and as they did, a foul odor wafted through the cold air, reminiscent of a toilet that hadn't been cleaned for 10 days. The smell caused several of the girls to turn pale. Ethan, having taken the permanent sensing elixir, found his senses far more acute than those of ordinary people, making the stench almost unbearable. He quickly cast a bubblehead charm on himself, Hermione, and Luna, regretting his earlier decision to use a diarrhea potion as a prank. Professor McGonagall, seeing this, nodded in approval and cast the charm on herself as well. Lupin followed suit, casting the charm on himself and Harry. A large bubble appeared around each of their heads, shielding them from the unpleasant smell. Does the Humping Willow hide the carcass of some animal? Professor McGonagall wondered aloud. Ethan shook his head. I don't know. It didn't smell like this last time I was here. Before entering the cave, Ethan stepped back, allowing Professor Lupin to lead Harry in first. Given the stench, he could already imagine the scene inside, though he had orchestrated it himself. He preferred not to witness the results firsthand. Beside him, Luna gave him a meaningful look, understanding his reluctance. Her expression was ghastly. As a psychic, she seemed to have sensed something amiss. Children, don't look around, Ethan admonished, tapping her lightly on the head. The girl stuck out her tongue and obediently retracted her psychic feelers. Within a minute of walking, the two leading the group suddenly halted. Harry felt his foot sink into something. The sticky substance on the beach soaked through his pants, but due to the head-soaking curse, he was unaware of the source of the foul smell. Attempting to move, he found it difficult to maintain his balance, his footsteps squelching with every move. Dancing lights! A ball of light burst forth from behind, voluntarily illuminating the path ahead and revealing Ethan's handiwork. Ethan, who was trailing behind, quickly glanced at the scene and immediately pulled Luna and Hermione back. However, it was too late, and everyone was shocked by the sight that greeted them. Chapter 235. I think it's better for you to go out and wait, Professor Lupin said with a wry smile, observing the astonishing scene before him. Ethan nodded, wishing nothing more than to escape the situation. He quickly ushered Hermione and Luna out, leaving only the two professors and Harry inside. Once outside the cave's entrance, they retreated further until they were confident the foul odor wouldn't reach them. Canceling the head-soaking curse, they welcomed the cold air of the Forbidden Forest, which felt exceptionally refreshing. Ethan in particular seemed to relish the fresh air, feeling rejuvenated as if every cell in his body was soaking it in. I can't believe it. How did they end up like that? It's disgusting. Hermione's complaints were almost incoherent. Why didn't they clean it up? Why were they lying there like that? How much had they eaten? Ethan's potion had clearly left her in shock, and even Ethan himself found the ordeal unbearable. He made a mental note to never venture near that corridor again, fearing the memory of the humping willow would trigger recollections of that chaotic scene. It took some time for the group to assist each other out of the tree hole. Harry supported Ron, while Professor Lupin aided Malfoy. Professor McGonagall, looking particularly stern, followed behind. Somehow the wands of the two unfortunate souls were returned to them, though it was unclear from where. Cleaned up, yet still visibly pale, Ron and Malfoy leaned on Harry and Lupin for support. Upon seeing them, Ethan and the others instinctively stepped back and covered their noses. Ron and Malfoy, initially indifferent due to their numb senses, soon began to smell the stench on themselves as their sense of smell returned. The embarrassment of being discovered in such a state was overwhelming. They wished they could disappear into the ground, especially since Professor McGonagall had already used her expertise with the fountain curse and cleaning spell to remove the visible mess, yet they still felt filthy and uncomfortable. Mr. Green, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, and Miss Lovegood, I hope none of you will speak of what you witnessed today, Professor McGonagall sternly advised. Ethan nodded in agreement, his intention never having been to cause serious harm. It's not a big deal, just go back and give it a good wash, Hermione suggested, her voice filled with basic compassion. Wash for at least 2 hours, Luna added, her voice ethereal as ever. Despite their kindness, the group couldn't suppress their nausea and quickly made their way back to the castle, eager to distance themselves from the unpleasantness. The two professors and Harry escorted the unfortunate duo back as well, though Ron and Malfoy had hoped to sneak into their dormitory's bathroom for a thorough wash. However, Professor McGonagall insisted on a visit to the school's medical office first, suspecting that their condition was not due to simple physiological reasons, but possibly the result of curses or potions. This is treatable, right? Ron asked Madame Pomfrey in the medical office, hopeful for relief from his discomfort. I won't have a stomachache again, will I? Ethan asked, puzzled. Certainly, Madame Pomfrey nodded, though she first donned a 3-layer mask. After a brief examination, she concluded, this may be due to accidental contamination with a potent potion that causes diarrhea. Why did you consume such a potion? Madame Pomfrey was incredulous, but Ron and Harry exchanged knowing glances, both immediately thinking of Fred and George, Ron's twin brothers. They recalled the twins mentioning a new prank involving diarrhea-inducing candy. Could it be that they had unwittingly become the test subjects for this prank, along with Malfoy? Ron hesitated to confront his brothers, fearing the incident would tarnish his reputation at Hogwarts if word got out. After receiving a potion from Madame Pomfrey, the duo hastily left the infirmary, darting through the corridors under the curious gazes of other students. They rushed CK to their dormitory, seeking refuge in the bathroom. In an uncharacteristic move, Ron discarded all his clothes into the trash, a significant departure from his usual frugality. He spent an hour in the bathroom, wishing he could cleanse himself thoroughly, inside and out. Harry's voice eventually reached him, urging, "We need to head to the Great Hall for dinner. We're running out of time." Despite the ordeal, Harry had lost his appetite, but Ron, feeling weak after the day's events, knew he needed to eat. With great reluctance, driven by the need to avoid fainting, he prepared to leave the bathroom. Malfoy shared their concerns. Several students who had missed dinner due to the incident gathered in the Great Hall, where only leftovers remained. Ethan, Luna, and Hermione were hastily finishing their meals when Ron and Malfoy arrived. Their sudden appearance startled the group, prompting them to jump up and instinctively step back. Ron sighed, glancing at Malfoy, his usual adversary. Malfoy, seeming eager to speak, cut him off. "Weasley, don't tell anyone about today." His tone was sharp. Ron, surprisingly calm, simply nodded in agreement. Then, Malfoy turned to Ethan and the others, his voice carrying a hint of desperation. "Ethan, please, about today." "Of course, we already promised in the Forbidden Forest," Ethan interrupted, not waiting for Malfoy to finish. "But could you please sit further away? I know you're clean now, but I can't shake off the feeling for at least a week." The two rivals, usually at odds, found themselves in rare agreement, nodding in unison. As they attempted to distance themselves, they accidentally bumped into each other, snorted dismissively, and turned away. This near-synchronized reaction amused Ethan, who mused that perhaps there was a peculiar camaraderie between them, akin to frenemies. As the new month began, Ethan thought about the importance of support from readers, silently hoping for votes, comments, and engagement to help sustain his writing journey. Chapter 236. Early the next morning, Ethan went to the auditorium for breakfast as usual. However, he found the atmosphere electric with excitement. The little wizards were all abuzz with the latest gossip. What had Ron and Malfoy been exposed for? Who had let the cat out of the bag? Ethan, always keen on juicy stories, made his way to the Ravenclaw table to find his fellow gossip enthusiast, Zhang Chu. To his surprise, he found himself the subject of many curious stares along the way, which only deepened his confusion. It wasn't until Zhang Chu gave him a look filled with mixed emotions and handed him a copy of the Daily Prophet that Ethan understood the source of the commotion. He was the melon at the center of the feast. The front-page headline of the Daily Prophet screamed about Sirius' trial from the day before. 12 years as a mouse, the former hero revealed as the real murderer. The Ministry of Magic had held a trial, resulting in Sirius Black's acquittal. The real perpetrator of the crimes for which Sirius had been blamed was finally revealed. "We are doing our best to improve laws and regulations while trying to make amends for the errors committed during the Barty Crouch Sr. era," Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge was quoted as saying. "I implore the wizarding community for forgiveness. After all, these events occurred under extraordinary circumstances." Ethan skimmed through the newspaper, noting that the coverage of yesterday's trial and the revelations about the past dominated its pages. The drama of the situation was undeniable. Articles such as "After 13 years, Sirius vindicated," "Animagus can evade Dementors," and "On the limitations of the Magical Law Commission" filled the paper, accompanied by numerous photographs. These included images of Sirius and Peter Pettigrew in their youth, Sirius in prison, his daring escape, and even Pettigrew's transformation into an animagus. Many of these photos were clearly sourced from within the Ministry of Magic, indicating a high level of cooperation between Gianna, Rita Skeeter, and the Ministry. The centerpiece of the coverage was a poignant photo from the trial, Sirius, kneeling and weeping, while Pettigrew's eyes were wide with despair. The contrast between hope and despair, rebirth, and impending doom was stark, with both men in the dock, separated only by a wall. Ethan mused that such a powerful image would be award-worthy even among muggles. As Ethan perused the newspaper while enjoying his sandwich, he realized that Gianna had involved him in the story's promotion. Rita Skeeter's article detailed his role in the events as if she had been there herself, based on the information he had shared with Gianna. No wonder he had received such intense scrutiny upon entering the auditorium. Penelope approached him to share that the number of young wizards signing up to join the Erudition Society had surged that morning, all eager to be associated with Ethan. It seemed his involvement in the trial had inadvertently served as a wave of live advertising. As he was about to leave the auditorium, a voice halted him. It was Harry. "Ethan, thank you for helping Sirius," Harry said, his expression complex. He recounted how he had once believed Sirius to be responsible for his parents' deaths, a belief that had filled him with hatred. To discover that he had been living with the true traitor for 3 years was a shocking revelation. And now, it was Ethan Green who had played a pivotal role in helping Sirius reclaim his life. "It doesn't matter. Anyone in my position would have done the same," Ethan replied with a smile. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Besides, Blake has already discussed the matter of compensation with me, so there's no need for thanks. Extra thanks." Despite everything, Harry gave Ethan a grateful hug, which left Ethan feeling somewhat helpless. He wanted to explain to Dumbledore that he hadn't intentionally sought out his savior. Rather, it was the other party who had approached him. This time, when he encountered Harry, he was alone, without Ron and Hermione by his side. Ethan could sense that Ron's absence wasn't due to him not coming, but rather because he was hiding behind a corner in the distance, unwilling to face Ethan. Understandably, after the embarrassing incidents Ron had experienced in Ethan's presence, from being discovered covered in filth to Ethan revealing Ron's unfortunate connection with a greasy, middle-aged man who transformed into an unsightly mouse, the same man Ron had unknowingly shared a bed and even kisses with, it was likely Ron would prefer a memory charm to forget these humiliations. As for Hermione, she still hadn't made amends with Ron, so naturally, she wasn't with them. At that moment, Ethan noticed another person approaching from a distance. The man was tall, with a mustache, clearly an adult wizard from outside their usual circle. "Sirius Black!" Ron exclaimed in surprise from his hiding spot. Sirius was looking at Harry with his dark gray eyes. Although still as lean as he had been during his trial, he was now well-dressed. His hair and beard were neatly groomed, and he wore an expensive, tasteful coat. His overall appearance was significantly improved, and he even wore cologne. While not fully returned to his former glory, there was a hint of his old charm and handsomeness. However, his face bore a tension that was hard to describe. Harry, facing Sirius, likely had a mix of anticipation, apprehension, and worry on his face, feeling awkward and stiff. After what seemed like both an instant and an eternity, Harry finally spoke to Sirius. "Hello, Harry," Sirius greeted. "I am Sirius Orion Black, but I don't know if anyone has told you, I am your godfather." "Yes, I think I know," Harry replied, looking into Sirius's eyes with curiosity and hope. The Sirius he had seen in newspapers had always appeared crazed and sullen. Harry had been concerned about what kind of godfather Sirius would be, but those worries now seemed unfounded. Sirius seemed relieved and smiled. "As your godfather, I've brought some greeting gifts, chosen with Ethan's advice. Let's see if you like them," Sirius said, handing Harry a large bag. Upon opening it, Harry discovered it was filled with prank props: dung bombs, burp candy, frog egg soap, a nose-biting teacup, Dr. Hardy's automatic igniter, and Water Blossom magical fireworks, all purchased from Zuko's joke shop. What young wizard wouldn't adore these toys? As Harry admired the prank props, he suddenly remembered something and exclaimed, "Firebolt!" Ron looked at Harry in surprise. "Hermione guessed before that you gave me the firebolt, right?" Harry looked up at Sirius, eager for confirmation. "Yes, I sent the firebolt to you. I placed the order directly with the Owl Post Office, using your name, but instructing them to withdraw the gold from Vault 711 at Gringotts, my own vault. Please consider it your 13th birthday gift from your godfather," Sirius explained with a smile. "Ha!" Ron said triumphantly. "See, no jinx. Hermione was wrong." "But Hermione did guess it was from him," Harry reminded them. At that moment, Harry felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. Sirius had remembered to send him a birthday gift even while on the run. For the first time, Harry felt the love of a family member. Suddenly, a small gray creature leaped onto Sirius's shoulder, adding to the moment's emotion and complexity. Perched on Ron's shoulder, the owl tilted its head, examining them curiously. Ron, intrigued, took a closer look and realized it was a slender owl. Sensing Ron's attention, the owl flew straight to him and landed gently on his palm. Ouch! Ron exclaimed as the little owl, hooting happily, pecked at his finger, a gesture of affection, it seemed. Ron, perhaps you'd like to adopt this owl. After all, due to my mistake, you lost your mouse, Sirius suggested with a smile. Ron's eyes widened in surprise. The owl continued to hoot excitedly. Adopt it? He asked somewhat skeptically after examining the owl for a moment. Thank you, but is this a real owl? Not someone's animagus? Harry and Sirius shared a laugh at the question. That's definitely good enough for me, Ron declared with a grin, accepting the owl as his own. Oh, and this, Sirius exclaimed, pulling a piece of parchment from his pocket and handing it to Harry. Harry quickly read the note and felt a surge of warmth and happiness, as if he had just downed a bottle of hot butterbeer. The note from Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, granted him permission to visit Hogsmeade Village on the weekend. Handing the parchment to Ron, Harry said, Great, now we can go to Hogsmeade together, officially. Ron cheered, then quickly covered his mouth, trying to contain his excitement. Sirius, smiling, reassured them. Don't worry, I know James had an invisibility cloak, and we used it just like you do. A hint of nostalgia crossed Sirius's eyes as he remembered those happy days. Suddenly, Sirius's mood shifted to hesitation. That's right, your parents appointed me as your guardian, he said somberly, in case anything happened to them. Harry waited, sensing there was more. Did Sirius mean what Harry thought he meant? Of course, I'd understand if you preferred to live with your aunt and uncle, Sirius added quickly. But think about it. My reputation has been restored if you want a different home. An explosion of emotion surged within Harry. What, live with you? Leave the Dursleys? He asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Of course I wouldn't expect you to want to, Sirius replied hastily, misunderstanding Harry's reaction. Are you kidding? Of course I want to leave the Dursleys. Do you have a house? When can I move in? Harry's enthusiasm was palpable. Really? You would? Sirius asked, disbelief and joy mingling in his voice. Yes, I'm serious, Harry exclaimed, standing up abruptly. Sirius, overwhelmed with happiness, laughed heartily and clapped Harry on the shoulder, reminiscent of times with James. I have to go now, Harry. I'll come for you when your holiday starts, Sirius said, his reluctance clear. Harry nodded eagerly, his mind already counting down the days until summer vacation, a stark contrast to his previous dread of the holiday period. Oh, right. Sirius paused, turning back to Harry with a thoughtful look. You should spend more time with Ethan at school. He's a great friend. Ron, watching Sirius walk away, then glanced at Harry, but held back any negative comments about Ethan. Next time we go to Hogsmeade, it'll be fun, Ron said, playing with the little owl in his hand, clearly smitten. Harry, touching the parchment signed by Sirius, smiled broadly. It's so good. We're leaving the Dursleys. Chapter 237. After Sirius left, he met Ethan at the other end of the corridor. Sorry, it took a while to catch up with Harry, and I kept you waiting, he said apologetically. It doesn't matter. It doesn't take long to get to know your godson, Ethan replied with a smile, waving his hand dismissively. As I said, I'm not in a hurry about the remuneration. But I don't want to delay it unnecessarily. I'm a bit impatient and don't like owing others, Sirius responded. If it's all the same to you, why don't we settle it now? Besides, today is the weekend, and there are no classes. Ethan nodded in agreement. Thus, he followed Sirius, and they left Hogwarts conspicuously. The young wizards they passed along the way were all very surprised to see Sirius. It was hard for them to believe that the person featured in the newspapers was actually there, and they gathered around to watch. It's been a long time since I've felt like the center of attention, Sirius joked. The last time I had this many people after me, it was the Dementors. Ethan greatly appreciated his optimistic attitude. After leaving Hogwarts, Ethan and Sirius apparated directly to the Black family's old home, number 12 Grimmauld Place. At this point, it had not yet become the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, and was still hidden from the uninvited. Ethan could see its exterior clearly. The old house, with its dirty walls and gloomy windows, looked completely at odds with its significant status. They ascended the broken stone steps to find the door's black paint peeling off, covered with scratches. The silver door knocker, shaped like a coiled snake, caught their attention. Notably, the door lacked a keyhole and a mailbox. Sirius, wielding his newly purchased wand, knocked on the door. Ethan heard a series of loud metal clangs and a sound reminiscent of rattling chains. The door creaked open. Stepping across the threshold, they entered the nearly dark foyer. Ethan detected a damp, musty odor mingled with the sweet scent of decay, giving the impression of an abandoned and empty house. Suddenly, a rustling sound was followed by the lighting of a row of old-fashioned gas lamps on the wall, casting an eerie, flickering light that illuminated the long, gloomy entrance hall. The peeling wallpaper and frayed carpets, along with a spiderweb-shaped chandelier overhead that shimmered, added to the atmosphere. Some portraits, blackened by age, hung crookedly on the walls. The chandelier and a candelabra on a rickety table nearby were both fashioned into the shape of a large snake. As Ethan surveyed the dilapidated old house, a loud explosion startled them, and a disheveled house elf appeared. It was Creature, the Black family's house elf. Wearing nothing but a dirty rag around his waist, he was almost naked. His appearance was that of extreme old age, with skin that seemed too much for his body. Although bald like all house elves, his large, bat-like ears were covered in white hair. His eyes were bloodshot, watery, and gray, and his large, fleshy nose resembled that of a pig. "Ah, it's the young master!" Creature's pale eyes suddenly widened, but his gaze at Sirius was filled with unmistakable hatred. He immediately bowed deeply, his posture so low that his large, pig-like nose flattened against the ground. Then, in a soft but clear voice, he said, "The young master is a disgusting, ungrateful, and filthy man who broke his mother's heart. Oh, my poor mistress! The man who swore never to recognize his son is back again, and it is said that he is still a murderer." Ethan struggled to hold back a smile as he observed Sirius, noticing the veins throbbing on his forehead. "My mother has no heart, Creature," Sirius retorted irritably. "She lived solely on resentment." "No matter what the young master says," Creature muttered indignantly, "the young master is not even worthy to clean the soles of his mother's shoes. Oh, my poor mistress, what would she say if she saw the young master now? How the mistress despises him! What a disappointment he is!" Creature wet again as he spoke. "Stand up quickly," Sirius said impatiently. "Okay, what do you want to do?" "I'm guarding the mistress's home," the elf repeated. "Creature will serve the noble Black family all his life." The elf straightened up, his eyes gleaming with malice. He evidently believed they couldn't hear him, for he continued, "The prodigal son has also brought back a little cub, and Creature doesn't know his name. What is he doing here? Creature doesn't know." "Okay, are you relieved now? Let's go, Creature," Sirius said coldly. The elf looked at Black in disbelief, seemingly hesitant to disobey the direct order. However, as he dragged his feet and walked out, he let out an earth-shattering wail. From Azkaban. When he came back, he gave Creature a thumbs up, and he even brought back a little cub. Creature must protect this family. Creature will never let the young master and that brat destroy this family. Creature, who had disappeared around the corner, was still wailing. "Shut up, Creature! If you keep howling, I will really kill someone!" Sirius shouted irritably. He picked up an umbrella stand and threw it in Creature's direction, venting his anger. "Oh crap, I forgot." Before Blake could finish his words, he was drowned out by a terrible, deafening, blood-curdling scream. The two velvet curtains, riddled with insect holes, suddenly parted without the umbrella stand's suppression, but there was no door behind them. For a moment, Ethan thought it was a window. Behind the window, an old lady wearing a black hat was screaming desperately, one sound after another, as if she was being tortured. "Brute! Witch! Dirty and sinful bastard! Bastards! Freaks and uglies! Get out of here! How dare you desecrate my ancestors' home?" Then Ethan realized it was only a life-size portrait, but he had never seen one so realistic and so unpleasant in his life. But the other portraits in the hall were awakened and began to scream so loudly that they were deafened. "Shut up, you horrible old witch! Shut up!" Blake rushed up and grabbed the curtain. The old lady suddenly turned pale. You! As soon as she saw Sirius, her eyes widened and she shouted sternly, "Prodigal son, the disgrace of the family, the evil seed I gave birth to." "I said, shut up!" Sirius roared. After much effort, he finally managed to close the curtain again. Ethan stretched out his wand and pointed at the umbrella stand in the distance. "The umbrella stand is coming." The umbrella stand flew straight towards him. Ethan caught the umbrella stand. It was so heavy. Caught off guard, Ethan almost let go. This umbrella stand was actually made of troll leg bones. He pressed the umbrella stand against the curtain and the old lady's screams disappeared, but the surrounding portraits were still screaming. Ethan used his wand to cast a stun spell on the other portraits, and an echoing silence filled the room. Well done. Breathing slightly and pushing away the long black hair that blocked his eyes, Sirius turned to look at Ethan. Ethan, he said with a straight face, now you have met my mother. Ethan didn't know what expression to make, so he pretended to be confused and said, Yours? Yes, my dear good mother. She kicked me out of the Black family, said Sirius. Why would she hang the portrait here? Asked Ethan. Maybe like Creature, to protect the oldest and noble Black family or something. I keep trying to get her off, but she seems to have cast a permanent sticking spell on the back of the canvas of her portrait. Maybe I should go to Nocturne Alley and find a special potion to break the spell. Ethan noticed that Sirius's tone was very stiff and cold. But through psychic intuition, Ethan understood that this was not the case. The colder Sirius appeared on the surface, the more hurt he was inside. Just like the old woman in the tapestry, Ethan turned his head, his eyes seeming to pierce through the facade. Ethan followed Sirius to the other end of the room, where a shabby, dirty tapestry covered the entire wall. The tapestry appeared scient, its colors faded as if gnawed by time itself, yet the gold thread embroidered into it still shimmered. Ethan could clearly see a detailed family tree that traced back to the Middle Ages. At the top of the tapestry, a few large words were embroidered, the oldest and noble Black family, forever pure. You're not on here, Ethan observed, looking at the bottom line of the family tree. I was, Sirius replied, pointing to a small blackened round hole on the tapestry, resembling a cigarette burn mark. My dear old mother obliterated my name after I ran away from home. Creature loved to whisper that story. Did you run away from home? Ethan asked, his gaze fixed on Sirius. I was about 16, Sirius recounted, and I had had enough. Where did you go? Ethan inquired, his interest piqued. Sirius fell silent for a moment before responding. James's house. Ethan looked up, feigning sudden interest in the tapestry. In his previous life, he came from an ordinary family in the Dragon Kingdom, and in this life, he started as an orphan. The dynamics of such a large family were foreign to him, both in his past and present lives. He mused that perhaps, in the distant future, one of his descendants might inscribe his name on a similar tapestry with pride. Yet he felt that creating one's own glory was more meaningful than inheriting it. His eyes scanned the tapestry, recognizing familiar names like Narcissa Malfoy and Andromeda Tonks, though her name was marked by a burnt spot. I hate them all, Sirius muttered, his voice a mix of reminiscence and confession. My parents were obsessed with pure blood. They believed that being born into the Black family meant nobility. My foolish brother, too weak-willed, believed everything they said. That was him. Sirius pointed to the name at the bottom of the family tree, Regulus Black, with a birth and death date indicating he died about 15 years ago. Sirius leaned closer, his expression complex. Despite his rejection of the family's pure-blood philosophy, it was clear he still harbored love for them and yearned for familial warmth. This is my brother, a fool, Sirius said, touching the area embroidered with Regulus Black's name. He was younger than me, and I was constantly reminded that he was much better than me. But the idiot! He joined the Death Eaters. Ethan knew, however, that this was merely a facade. It was Regulus Black who, at the cost of his life, discovered another of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Are your parents also Death Eaters? Ethan asked. No, but believe me, they agreed with Voldemort's ideology. They supported the idea of maintaining pure wizard blood, eliminating Muggleborns, and ensuring pure bloods held power, Sirius explained, pausing briefly. Of course, they weren't alone. Before Voldemort showed his true colors, many believed some of his ideas were valid. Ethan became increasingly convinced that Sirius might have despised his parents' ideals, but didn't truly hate them. I haven't looked at this in years, Sirius said, moving on. This is Phineas Nigellus, my great-great-grandfather. See? He's the most unpopular headmaster in the history of Hogwarts. Yet, Ethan thought, in his time, Phineas Nigellus faced an unparalleled and terrifying dark wizard at Hogwarts, almost single-handedly eradicating the Fire Serpent party of poachers and dark wizards that were rampant at the time. Thinking of the vast chasm beneath Hogwarts, Ethan mused, and Araminta Mellifron, my mother's cousin, she tried to push through a Ministry of Magic decree to legalize the killing of muggles. He paused, a grimace crossing his face. And my dear Aunt Elidora. She started the dreadful family tradition of decapitating house elves when they became too old to carry their plates. Of course, whenever a decent person appears in the family, they sever ties with them, he added with a hint of bitterness. I noticed that Tonks's mother's name was on it too, but it was burned like yours, Ethan pointed out. Oh yes, Andromeda is my favorite koozie, Sirius said, his mood visibly brightening. Speaking of which, Tonks and I are still related. That's pretty cool, Ethan smiled at him. Sister Tonks and her parents have been very kind to me, but don't expect me to start calling you uncle because of this. What a coincidence, Sirius remarked, clearly pleased. Since Andromeda also recognizes Ethan, it means that he is indeed a good kid and not as much of a concern as Dumbledore suggested. Sirius recalled how Dumbledore had picked him up the day before, and had emphatically warned him of the potential dangers Ethan might pose. However, his own experience of being rescued and his relationship with his cousin made him increasingly skeptical of those warnings. Unfortunately, I didn't recognize Nymphadora when we were in the Shrieking Shack before, he sighed, a hint of regret in his voice. The last time I saw her, she was still a 9-year-old child. I didn't expect that she would become such an outstanding auror in the blink of an eye. Everyone listened to her at that time, right? Yes, Tonks is Sister Gianna's right-hand man, Ethan suggested. But it's not too late for you to get to know her again. That's right. After returning home after so many years, it's time to visit more often, Sirius nodded in agreement. But before that, let's hurry up and fulfill our promise. Chapter 238. Sirius stood up straight and led Ethan through the stairs in the hall, ascending to the second floor. There are some collections here that might interest you, Sirius pointed towards the dusty glass door cabinets flanking the mantel. Take your pick. As he spoke, Sirius moved to open the tightly drawn curtains. Suddenly, he cursed under his breath, and Ethan turned to see what had caused such a reaction. From the folds of the curtains, several adult fox beetles emerged. Their shiny wings buzzed and flapped vigorously. Their small, needle-like teeth bared menacingly. Their small yet exquisitely formed bodies were covered in thick black hair, and their tiny fists were clenched in anger. Caught off guard, Sirius was bitten, causing him pain. I've never seen such an infestation of pests. What has Creature been doing for the past 10 years? Sirius remarked bitterly. Ethan, with a casual flick of his wand, cast a large, anti-evil magic circle. The weak dark creatures, like the fox beetles, stood no chance against it. They fell to the floor like dumplings, soon lying dead all around. Oh, what a beautiful spell, kid. If you ever decide to enter the pest control business, you'll definitely be the top fox-killing expert, Sirius commented, half in jest. Ethan couldn't help but offer a wry smile in response. The anti-evil magic circle was effective against any evil creature, including but not limited to basilisks, chimeras, five-legged beasts, and even Voldemort, though the latter was hardly a beast. Sirius, nursing his bitten hand, settled into an armchair, only to leap up moments later with a cry of disgust. This time, he had discovered a nest of dead beetles beneath him. Ethan struggled to suppress his laughter. Turning his attention to the cabinet before him, Ethan noted the glass door was filthy, obscuring the many magical items within. He used his wand to clean off the dust, then carefully opened the cabinet door to organize its contents. Among the items were a rusty dagger enchanted with bleeding magic, talons likely belonging to a hippogriff, a snakeskin from an African tree snake, a decorative crystal vase adorned with an opal, and a silver snuff box containing sarcoma powder that attempted to bite Ethan but was neutralized by an elemental shout. There was also a multi-legged, tweezers-like instrument that could crawl like a spider, a hypnotic music box, a heavy souvenir box that seemed impossible to open, numerous antique seals, and in a dusty box, a Merlin-level medal awarded to Sirius's grandfather for his contributions to the Ministry of Magic. That is to say, he gave them a lot of gold, Sirius explained with a hint of contempt. Ethan felt a mix of anger and shame at the thought of such actions diminishing the value of the metal. Eventually, Ethan found one of his main objectives for the visit, a golden locket containing an evil soul fragment. It was the Horcrux that Regulus Black had sacrificed himself to retrieve. Without hesitation, Ethan used soul fire on the locket, effectively destroying Voldemort's soul fragment within. He chose not to take anything else from the collection. While many of the magical artifacts appeared novel, none seemed particularly special. However, the bang boggart in the desk nearby caught his interest. Ethan activated the psychic barrier, trapping the creature in a small box, which he then placed in his bag before finding Sirius again. "You didn't take anything? But then again, a clever young wizard like you probably wouldn't be interested in Merlin medals, gold rings, and the like," Sirius observed, noting Ethan's empty hands. "In that case, there's a library upstairs, if you're interested," Sirius offered. "Of course, that's exactly what I want," Ethan replied eagerly. Apart from the Horcrux, the library was his real goal. The Black family, being one of the oldest pure-blood families, boasted an impressive collection of books. The library's 4 walls were lined with bookshelves, filled from floor to ceiling. Ethan was delighted at the prospect of exploring them. Ethan's heart yearned to delve into a book, but Blake intervened. "Be careful, Ethan. Most of the books here are dangerous. You know, many of them are imbued with dark magic on their covers." Ethan nodded in understanding. He was well aware, yet confident in his magical prowess to discern the risks associated with these magical tomes. Greater arcane vision. Casting the spell on himself, Ethan could now clearly see the magical aura emanating from each book on the shelf. He donned a pair of dragon skin protective gloves he had prepared earlier. Just as he was about to proceed, Blake spoke up again. "Ethan, I still have some feelings for you." Ethan paused and turned to Blake. "Please use the knowledge from these books wisely, and don't become a wizard like that mysterious man," Blake advised earnestly. Despite his skepticism towards Dumbledore's words, he felt it was his duty as an elder to offer guidance. "And don't share this knowledge with Harry just yet." At that moment, Ethan felt as if he were the mischievous child being cautioned by a friend's parent not to lead their child astray. Ethan nodded. He would have heeded this advice even without Blake's reminder, having already agreed to Dumbledore's request. After browsing through several magical books, Ethan discovered one detailing simplified animagus rituals, which proved to be quite enlightening. "Can I take the bookshelf with me?" Ethan inquired. "Sure," Sirius responded, though puzzled about how Ethan intended to move so many bookshelves. Then he watched in amazement as Ethan waved his hand, opening a portal similar to the one in the Shrieking Shack's corridor. Wooden golems, tall and lifelike, emerged from the portal, organizing themselves into pairs to methodically transport the bookshelves through the portal. "Ethan, what lies beyond this door?" Blake asked, pointing at the portal with a mix of curiosity and bewilderment. "This is a portal to my home," Ethan explained. "These are wooden golems I've crafted. They're not as versatile as house elves, capable only of simpler tasks." Ethan was in the process of creating more sophisticated golems for detailed chores, as he couldn't manage all the household tasks alone. If unsuccessful, he might resort to hiring a house elf. Despite Ethan's explanation, Sirius remained astonished. The young wizard before him seemed to have surpassed even Dumbledore in some respects, particularly in creating portals and golems. From this perspective, Sirius's earlier concerns seemed unfounded. Ethan's demonstrated abilities suggested that even without the Black family's magical books, he could still invent formidable spells. Once the wooden golems finished with the bookshelves, Blake led Ethan to a nondescript room on the first floor, its entrance secured by a complex series of spells, commands, and a drop of blood. Inside, Ethan found boxes neatly stacked, each filled with glittering gold. Ethan's reaction was one of calm indifference, a testament to his maturity and restraint, qualities that surprised Blake. "Now, all of this is yours," Blake said with a smile. For Ethan, who possessed the Philosopher's Stone, these treasures held little allure. Yet, Blake's generous gesture was not lost on him. Ethan's refusal of the vast wealth laid before him left Sirius Black both surprised and impressed. "Say okay. I just want your books and collections, Ethan stated, dismissing the heaps of gold and silver with a shake of his head. Sirius, puzzled by Ethan's disinterest in the fortune, tried to persuade him, but these gold and silver are also my treasures. I never break my promise. Moreover, such a huge amount of wealth can support you in doing many things. With this wealth, you could become a big shot in the wizarding world. I'm already a big shot in the wizarding world, Ethan retorted with unwavering confidence, and I believe that with my abilities, my status will only continue to rise. Surpassing Dumbledore won't be difficult. His words, brimming with assurance, convinced Sirius that Ethan could indeed achieve what he claimed. Ethan sighed, adopting a more persuasive tone. Sirius, you need this money more than I do. Think about Harry. Although he has the property left by his parents, it's only enough for him to live comfortably. Don't you want to provide Harry with the best possible living environment? He paused, allowing his words to sink in before adding, how about this? If I encounter any projects in the future that require significant funding, I'll come to you for investment as soon as possible. What do you think? The mention of Harry made Sirius fall silent, reflecting on Ethan's words. After a long pause, he sincerely thanked Ethan. Well, in that case, I'll keep this wealth with me for the time being. If you need it in the future, you can come to me at any time. Having confirmed there was nothing else he desired from the house, Ethan left number 12 Grimmauld Place, waving goodbye to Sirius as he departed. Chapter 239. Although Ethan Green had acquired a vast collection of Black family treasures, he didn't dive into them right away. The Quidditch season was in full swing, and the Ravenclaw team's next game was drawing near. According to Tonks, Hamish McFarlane, the captain of the Yin Kingdom team for the upcoming World Cup, planned to attend Hogwarts to watch Ravenclaw's performance. If Ethan hoped to join Cyrilla in the next Quidditch World Cup, he needed to excel in the upcoming games. Roger, too, was particularly enthusiastic about the Quidditch match. It was his last game before graduation, and despite Ravenclaw's consecutive championships in the past 2 years, he was pouring his heart and soul, nearly 200% of his energy, into securing a third consecutive championship as the team's captain. His determination was palpable. He tirelessly discussed strategies and organized training sessions for the team. However, the team soon noticed a significant change in Ethan Green. Previously, he had treated Quidditch as a mere hobby, but now he was fully engaged, even taking the lead in the team's tactical planning. Known as a genius with a high IQ, Ethan's proficiency in any endeavor was well recognized. It wasn't long before the team discovered that his talents extended beyond playing skills to include a deep understanding of Quidditch tactics. Ethan discarded the fancy, traditional tactics that Roger had established, such as the Transylvanian feint, the Wollongong shimmy, the sloth grip roll, the Chelmondistan charge, and the starfish and stick. He viewed these as primarily showcasing individual skills, which, while not entirely unhelpful, were not the most effective use of the team's time. In his view, the emphasis on individual prowess in Quidditch overshadowed the importance of overall tactics and strategy. Given that a Quidditch team consists of 7 players, Ethan believed focusing solely on individual skills was a misstep, especially since Ravenclaw already had 2 core players, himself and Cyrilla, to handle skill-intensive roles. Thus, under Ethan's guidance, Ravenclaw's training was divided into 2 segments: traditional technical and tactical training, and comprehensive tactical training. He introduced several new strategies, such as long passes and fast breaks. The idea was to capitalize on the moment the goalkeeper or a chaser intercepted the quaffle from an opponent's shot. They would then quickly pass it across the field to catch the opposing team off guard, allowing Ethan and Cyrilla to initiate a swift counterattack. The challenge with this tactic was ensuring the accuracy of long passes and the offensive player's ability to react promptly. However, for Ravenclaw, these were minor concerns. Ethan and Cyrilla's exceptional reaction times and the team's adaptability made this strategy a promising addition to their playbook, signaling a potential shift in their approach to the game and possibly setting the stage for unprecedented success in the upcoming matches. The speed and agility of the firebolts between their legs ensured they could launch a swift attack when necessary. As for the issue of inaccurate passing, the chaser worked diligently to catch the ball accurately. Consequently, goalkeeper Grant Page abandoned the complex starfish upside-down maneuver to concentrate on practicing long passes, with Roger, the least skilled of the three chasers, joining him in this effort. Ethan's second strategy involved a pick-and-roll maneuver, where all players engaged in one-on-one defense against their opponents. However, when a chaser with the ball was intercepted, the nearest teammate would quickly switch to block the defender, facilitating an easier breakthrough and attack. This tactic's success hinged on creating a temporal disruption and unsettling the opponent's rhythm through sudden defensive shifts. Its inclusivity was a significant advantage, allowing beaters and seekers to set screens for chasers without directly handling the quaffle. Additionally, Ethan introduced a run-and-gun tactic, emphasizing a fast-paced game that exhausted the opponent through relentless flying, passing, and shooting. This strategy was particularly well-suited for Ravenclaw, given their superior broomsticks. The team had 3 firebolts, and their older competition broomsticks, including Nimbus 2000s, could be substituted if necessary. Ethan's straightforward yet effective tactics resonated with the Ravenclaw players, aligning perfectly with the house's ethos of using wisdom strategically. "Let us use our wisdom to outmaneuver them," Roger declared enthusiastically. This marked a shift in their training focus towards mastering basic maneuvers like passing, sharp turns, and long passes, aiming to surprise their opponents in the upcoming game. As February drew to a close, Ravenclaw prepared for their first match. Ethan reached out to Onyxia, arranging for reporters from the Quibbler to cover the event at Hogwarts, indirectly pressuring Hamish McFarlane, who planned to attend. After acquiring a significant stake in the Quibbler over the Christmas holidays, Ethan had overseen its expansion and restructuring under Onyxia's leadership, introducing new sections on current affairs, news, magical issues, and Quidditch. On game day, the Ravenclaw team received a warm welcome in the auditorium, with even Hufflepuff and Slytherin students offering applause and cheers. The rivalry between Hufflepuff and Gryffindor had intensified after a Quidditch match incident involving Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter, leading to a fallout. Slytherin, harboring deep animosity towards Gryffindor, eagerly supported Ravenclaw. Ethan's popularity had soared across Hogwarts, with hundreds of young wizards joining the erudite society. Over 20 students had delved into arcane theory under Ethan's tutelage, gaining insight into the basic divisions of magical schools and learning several practical spells. This growing interest in magic and strategy underscored Ethan's influence and the anticipation surrounding the upcoming Quidditch match. In the lounge, several young wizards were showcasing their mage hands, using them to skillfully fold a quilt in midair and pour a cup of tea, among other tasks, earning unanimous praise from the onlookers. These talented individuals often became central figures in their respective colleges. Ethan's mastery over these skills essentially allowed him to sway public opinion across the major colleges. As a result, Ethan quickly rose to the status of a national idol, and even the Ravenclaw Quidditch team reaped the benefits. In response to the exclusion faced by the 3 houses, Alexander and the Gryffindors decided to highlight Harry's firebolt by placing it prominently on the dining table. Led by Wood, the Gryffindor players engaged in a series of pre-match rituals around the firebolt, treating it with a reverence akin to a pilgrimage. Given that Ravenclaw boasted 3 firebolts and 2 expert flyers, Harry and his firebolt became Gryffindor's beacon of hope, dominating their discussions. Ron, Harry's close friend, would enthusiastically share the unique sensation of flying on a firebolt to anyone who showed interest, describing it as exceptionally safe even during intense physical activity. Meanwhile, Harry was absorbing Wood's pre-match advice. "I don't want to pressure you too much, Harry, but we must win today, all right?" Harry nodded in agreement. "So, you'll need to push yourself harder during the match. It's crucial, even if it means playing rough. We need to secure a victory." Wood emphasized, his approach reminiscent of his old rival Flint. It seemed that people often become what they despise the most. Harry remained silent, contemplating the weight of the match versus his future happiness. Across the room, the atmosphere at the Ravenclaw table was noticeably more relaxed, filled with laughter and conversation. Ethan was discussing tactics with Jiang Chu, focusing on maximizing the firebolt's potential. Jiang Chu, if it comes down to it, don't hesitate to knock Harry off his broom. Remember, this is a comp, a Titian, Ethan said, instilling a competitive spirit in her. Jiang Chu, catching Harry's gaze, nodded politely with a smile and whispered to Ethan, "Understood." Harry's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, suddenly feeling that even if Jiang Chu caught the golden snitch, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Unbeknownst to Wood, the hope he saw in Gryffindor was on the verge of becoming Ravenclaw's secret weapon. Chapter 240. While Ravenclaw and Gryffindor were locked in a competitive rivalry, moments of harmony still emerged. For instance, Luna from Ravenclaw approached Ginny from Gryffindor and placed her roaring lion hat on Ginny's head, while she donned an eagle hat with flapping wings herself. Luna supported Gryffindor whenever Ravenclaw wasn't playing. In another instance of cross-house camaraderie, Hermione from Gryffindor secretly approached Ethan. "Look, I prepared a gift overnight," she said, a twinkle in her eye as she presented a small bag of badges. The badge was blue with bronze lettering that read, "Ethan, come on." After a few seconds, the text vanished, replaced by "Flapping Wings High," alongside an image of a flying eagle. Hermione waved her wand over the badge, and the words and patterns magically animated, circling around her head. "It seems you've mastered the silent phantom," Ethan praised, impressed. "The next step is the weak phantom, which can produce sounds." "Oops, we're actually discussing magic at this time," Hermione said, her lips forming a pout. "It's my fault," Ethan replied with a smile, taking her hand. "Then, thank you, dear Miss Granger, for supporting a Ravenclaw wizard under pressure." "As long as you know," Hermione whispered back. "So, you must work hard in this game and defeat Gryffindor outright, so those people can't complain anymore." Ethan understood that Hermione was referring to Ron Weasley and the girls who had ostracized her. Despite the revelation that Scabbers was actually Peter Pettigrew, Hermione and Ron's relationship had yet to fully recover. This year's demanding schoolwork only exacerbated Hermione's isolation. Ethan ruffled Hermione's hair sympathetically, already contemplating giving her a permanent elixir when the opportunity arose. "Don't worry, Hermione, I will avenge you," Ethan solemnly promised. "Then it's settled," Hermione said, her cheeks flushed as she stood up and distributed the badges she had made to the other Ravenclaw students. Suddenly, Roger, the current captain, burst into the auditorium, out of breath. "I just checked the weather outside. It's good today. No wind, the sun is a bit dazzling, so be careful. The ground is hard, which is perfect for taking off quickly." He paced the length of the Ravenclaw table, ensuring all team members were ready. Eventually, the castle gates opened, and the entire school spilled onto the lawn. The Ravenclaw players, brooms in hand, followed Roger to the locker room. Upon reaching the stadium, the atmosphere was electric. 3/4 of the crowd, clad in blue and waving flags adorned with eagles, cheered loudly. Commentator Lee Jordan's voice boomed through the stadium. "Look, everyone, the Gryffindor team is here. Harry Potter, Katie Bell, Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinnet, the Weasley brothers, and Captain Oliver Wood. They are once-in-a-decade geniuses, the best Hogwarts has seen, a generation of miracles." Jordan's biased commentary was met with boos, causing Professor McGonagall to blush slightly. "The Ravenclaw team is here. Ethan Green, Cyrilla Leanne, and Jiang Chu. Ravenclaw boasts 3 firebolts. Fortunately, Gryffindor has one too, evening the playing field somewhat," she announced. The two teams faced each other, the tension palpable. "The 2 captains shook hands," announced Madame Hooch. Roger and Wood exchanged handshakes, their eyes betraying their fierce desire to win. "Get on your broomsticks," Madame Hooch commanded. 3, 2, 1. Her whistle was lost in the roar of the crowd as the players ascended into the sky. Ethan, Cyrilla, Jiang Chu, and Harry, each mounted on a firebolt, soared above the crowd, drawing all eyes to them. Ethan, clutching the quaffle, was at the center of attention. The battle for supremacy had begun. The game had finally begun. At the start, Ethan deviated from his usual strategy and advanced alone with the quaffle. In prior training sessions, the standard tactic he devised for Ravenclaw involved a pick-and-roll play. Ethan and Cyrilla alternated roles as the pivot, with the other acting as the quaffle handler. Originally, Ethan had envisioned employing a triangle offense. The essence of this strategy is to establish a triangle formation on the strong side to facilitate one-on-one opportunities, using numerous movements to constantly shift between the strong and weak sides. This approach aims to exploit the advantage of one-on-one situations by drawing double teams and creating openings. Both Ethan and Cyrilla are exceptional players, so much so that Professor McGonagall believes they could easily qualify for the national team. However, Roger, the other chaser, doesn't even rank among the top chasers at Hogwarts. Despite being part of the Iron Triangle of the Ravenclaw team, Roger's performance is lackluster. Before reaching his prime, he began to decline, and his scoring rate has become abysmal. His proficiency seems limited to defense and managing the team's daily tasks, which is the only reason Ethan keeps him on the team. However, Ethan chose not to initiate the game with the pick-and-roll tactic. The primary reason was the firebolt broomstick he was riding. During a practice match, he had discovered its incredible capabilities. With his skills and the firebolt's speed, he could breach most defenses effortlessly. At the start of the game, when the teams were not yet entangled, Ethan saw no need to wait for his teammates to execute the pick-and-roll, as it would slow down the pace of offense and defense and not leverage the firebolt's speed. Gryffindor had prepared for this, aware of the firebolt's potential. In this match, Harry was tasked not only with catching the golden snitch, but also with aiding the chasers in defense. Their objective was clear: to prevent star players like Ethan and Cyrilla from amassing a significant number of points, a feat they had achieved against Gryffindor in previous years. Their goal today was to mitigate this advantage, at least until Harry could catch the golden snitch. Over the years, Harry had evolved from a solitary player to one who understood the importance of teamwork. Previously, his strategy was straightforward, focused solely on the snitch, neglecting collaboration with his teammates. However, Quidditch is a 7-player game, and even the Seeker's role is integral to the team's overall strategy. This perspective is shared by Ethan, who believes in the synergy between chasers, seekers, and beaters. They can support each other in various ways, such as double-teaming or executing pick-and-rolls to create opportunities. A seeker focused only on the snitch, without contributing to the team's play, would be easily exploited by the opposition. While Oliver Wood might not have had as sophisticated a tactical understanding as Ethan, the pressure from Ravenclaw compelled him to maximize Harry Potter's role, almost treating him as 3 players in one. Gryffindor attempted to double-team Ethan, but they reacted too quickly, Li Qiaodong exclaimed from the commentary box. The 4 firebolts took the lead in the air, showcasing both agility and precision, allowing to fully appreciate the speed of the firebolts, he said in professional tone. One must know that it can accelerate from a standstill to 150 miles per hour in just 10 seconds. It boasts a magical braking effect and can automatically hover at the perfect height, making it the dream choice for any Quidditch player. The Irish national Quidditch team is fully equipped with these brooms. He added, "We can look forward to their performance in this year's World Cup. However, I personally support the Scottish team. They were the runners-up last time and met in the final. Jordan, it's not the World Cup, it's the Hogwarts Quidditch Cup." Professor McGonagall shouted loudly. "Oh, well, couldn't help it, Professor," Lee apologized. Ethan's speed finally slowed down, and Angelina and Harry entangled him, trying to prevent him from continuing to break through. Angelina's intention wasn't just to trap Ethan. She straightened up, grasped the mahogany hand, with all her strength, and leaned toward Ethan. She remembered that Ravenclaw's chasers had 2 firebolts, and Harry could only block one at a time. Therefore, after cooperating with Harry to curb Ethan's acceleration, she knew she would have to stop Ethan alone. The 2 broomsticks collided, bursting out a string of sparks and making a sizzling sound. At that moment, 2 dull and suppressed sounds appeared in the distance. A bludger, running like thunder, that suddenly jumped out menacingly and shot toward Ethan. "Brilliant! It's Fred and George's iconic tag team," Lee cheered loudly. A double hit refers to 2 beaters hitting a bludger at the same time, making the bludger's attack more lethal. This requires tacit cooperation, otherwise the second beater may directly smash it in the air or be hit by their own bludger. The twins' understanding is definitely the best in Hogwarts. The bludger turned into a black shadow and went straight for Ethan's back. If it hit, it would cause severe injury. However, Ethan was not panicked at all. He had already noticed the strange man sitting next to Professor Flitwick with a camera. It was clear that this was the reporter from the Quibbler. His camera had already locked onto him. Ethan realized that if the game continued this way, it would be a waste of this opportunity. So, he raised his whole body and then jumped away from the broomstick. All the young wizards stood up, looking at the falling Ethan. Many people covered their eyes. The new month has arrived. I am asking for a wave of support, orders, flowers, and monthly passes. Please leave a review and reward. If you have any votes, give them to me as the author. This is really important to me.